So my name is Katerina Odarchenko. I represent SAC Group. It's a consulting company which work on elections. So we work on political management issues, on advocacy issues, lobbying, and mostly we concentrate on Eastern Europe and Central Asia market. And in a community of IGAPA Network, International Government Affairs Professionals Association, please feel free to contact me about some specifics of market in this region. And I will explain you a little bit history also of our networks. That's why today we will concentrate on experience of government relations, advocacy, and more wider on dialogue between political leaders, between civil society, between businesses, how it works and how it works in different cases. For example, in the cases where it's associations, where it's businesses, where it's companies who do lobbying, and we'll concentrate also on direct practices to know more and also to do effective networking, because main aim also of community is not only to do press releases and some good PR for our members. It's also a very important function of development, this transparent dialogue, and a very important function of deep networking within members from different countries with different backgrounds, but still for mutual moving forward. Today we have 4 panel discussion, and it's panel discussions about leadership in this sector. And first panel discussion will be with people who have deep experience in understanding global processes. And this panel discussion will lead with our good friend Adam, who is one of the best professionals in government relations. And it is interesting that Adam worked not only with Americans, he also worked a lot with people from United Arab Emirates here. So he have quite good experience with international dialogue. Before I invite Adam to lead this panel and to explain like his work, his experience, I also will mention that on the same week, I'm originally from Ukraine, so this week we also have Ukrainian Advocacy Days on the Hill. If you have time, please join. It's meetings with members of Congress about bills which connect with Ukraine and this tragic situation. And if our members who will watching us in record, so who here want to help people in Ukraine, you can do that, for example, of support Uriel's initiative. Here, lead charity foundation for women's health, or if you want to help militaries, also Azov, it's a military group who fight against Russians long time on Azovstal. They also need your help, and I can share their story with you and their contacts with you if you want to help. If you want to help as lobbyists, please come to Ukrainian Advocacy Days and support efforts of meetings with people here in DC. Thank you for your time, and let's move forward to Adam and to our first panel. Adam can also represent members of our first panel, if it's possible, and we will be happy to answer your questions. So we'll be please be active, ask your questions, and you can ask them, in audience, or to write to our Zoom link also. Thank you, Adam, please.
Well, thank you so much, Katerina, and to everyone who is here today. It's a very unique and exciting time in Washington, D.C. There is truly never a dull moment on Capitol Hill, whether it be the conflicts of domestic policy and the division of Congress that we have, with the White House and the battles that are continuing to engage U.S. policymakers, to U.S. efforts
Recording
overseas,
in progress.
whether that be in the Ukraine and the continued war that rages between Russia and Ukraine, to the rising tensions that are going on in the Asian nations of the world, especially between the United States and China, the thawed relationship that currently exists between President Xi and President Biden, to many other diplomatic international issues that are commanding an extraordinary amount of time and attention from Washington. But we're seeing policymakers and their teams really look to private sector industry experts, people who can lend a very critical perspective from the work that they have done overseas or that they bring to Washington as we are trying to navigate and solve some of these current political challenges that exist not just in Washington, D.C., but at capitals around the world. So many of our panelists I have met and spoken and worked with before. Very happy to have them join us here. There's no one who can do a better job of introducing them than themselves. So what I'm going to ask is for each panelist to just take a brief moment to introduce themselves, share a little bit about their work in Washington and on the international stage, and then we'll go to some questions and we'll bring in questions from the audience as well. So I'm going to deviate from the traditional. I'm going to start all the way at the end and have my good friend, Mr. Leif Larson, start and make his introduction and a few brief comments.
Well, as Adam said, my name is Leif
Recording in
Larson.
progress.
I've been working in political and advocacy and kind of government relations forum for about the last 23 years. Started on basically producing TV spots for candidates and have moved on to general consulting, message development, and as was mentioned earlier, a lot of times political consultants will move into the advocacy realm, and I've done a lot of that work as well. So I've kicked around this city for about 23 years, and we run into a lot of people that you know through other people, and you find that those type of relationships are also great for offering up new and unique perspectives for in the political realm and in kind of general lobbying and government affairs realm as well, because things always seem to be changing. And as Adam said, we're this 2024 may be a tipping point on a lot of different areas, so it should be interesting, and we'll see how things roll out, and look forward to any questions you may have.
Jay Townsend. I live in New York City. I fell in love with politics when I was 13. By 17, I decided to make it a career. I have worked for no other clients other than politicians the entirety of my career. That is all I will ever do. It's the only thing I've ever enjoyed doing. So I do not wear a partisan lens. I am not a Republican. I am not a Democrat because I don't have to be anymore to make a living. My clients come to me from places they find me online, probably about 30% foreign and 70% in the United States or Canada. That's what I do. I had the good fortune of meeting New York when I was 17, which was all she wrote for me because it looked a hell of a lot more interesting than the farm where I was living at the time. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Natalia Dubrovec, and I'm from Montenegro. I'm new to the politics and lobbying space. In the past 6-7 years I've spent in the private sector here in the US. But as mentioned here, we're in increasingly changing dynamic times, so very interested in this space. I'm also increasingly interested in politics and in this arena. I think the Western Balkan space is going to be increasingly more important as part of Europe and the West in general. So, thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Peter Husey. I'm currently with the Hudson Institute, and I have my own business, which I've had since January of 1981. Since '81, when I went to work for the Reagan administration as a consultant, my job was to, as a couple of the staff said, your job is to build the MX missile, which is the most controversial, difficult to find basing mode for, and do arms control, defeat the Soviet Union, and if you can help do some other things, that was fine. I've been doing this nuclear stuff and missile defense and space and arms control for 40 years, 43 years actually. And in this club, I've held 1,570 breakfast seminars for members of Congress in doing what I call public diplomacy. There's the diplomacy that lobbyists do that's not printed in the Washington Post. Then there's the stuff you do publicly, which our breakfast seminars where press were invited. And it was for members of Congress originally, we did it over in the Capitol. And then the demand for it got such, so we brought it over here. So we had business, we had nonprofit groups like Hudson joined, we had media, members of Congress, staff, and we had all the top people like Al Haig and Vice President Quayle and Vice President Dick Cheney, Al Haig and others speak on behalf of the Strategic Modernization Program in the United States of America, missile defense, ending the Soviet Union, doing arms control as opposed to going up, going down. And I'm still doing that. And as you know, every time you turn around, the nuclear situation changes. I mean, it's now vastly different than it was 10 years ago when our nuclear posture view thought China and Russia would cooperate with the United States to stop terrorists from getting nuclear weapons. And then we found documents back in '82 where Deng Xiaoping and the Russian leader both agreed to send nuclear weapons technology to Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, Libya, and Iraq. The very terror groups that we thought in 2010 they were going to help us, terror organizations and countries, we thought they were going to help us deal with. So this is my specialty is how to change the narrative in public policy. As Thatcher said, the job is not to go find out what people think and agree with them to get elected, but to find out what is needed and make sure people come to you, which she and the Pope and Reagan did in an exemplary fashion, which is irrespective of your politics, they showed us how it's done. And I have to be honest, I was overwhelmed to be a 30-year-old to go work for the White House and be part of that effort that compared to where we were in the 1970s and where we were at the end of the 80s, at the end of the Soviet Union. That's an extraordinary achievement.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for everyone's comments. Let me just make a brief introduction myself, and I want to dive into a few questions for the panel, and of course open it up to our audience. As Caterina said, my name is Adam Raisler. I was born and raised in Bucharest, Romania, and immigrated to the United States. And unlike my good friend Leif, I tend to try to avoid saying how many years I've been in DC. So I will say that I've been here through 4 presidents and 2 impeachments. And I'll let everyone else try to figure out the exact math on that. But as Caterina mentioned, work at a public policy lobbying firm that is led by 3 former members of Congress. And we represent clients on a variety of issues. And we represent clients in various industry sectors as well as foreign nations, governments, and businesses here in Washington, D.C. as they seek to navigate the complexity that is Washington. And so I want to dive right in with a point that both Peter and Leif brought up. And I want our other 2 panelists, Natalia and Jay, to also dive in. But I'd like our anchors on this table to start. Peter, you had mentioned the comment of the narrative of public policy. And Leif, you talked about your work in TV spots and message development. Leif, can you start by taking a page off of what Peter mentioned on how he's worked on issues of arms control, nuclear and missile defense, which are enormously complicated issues. In today's world of cyber technology, where we're limited by how many characters we can use in communicating messages, how are policymakers communicating messages, but also how are they learning from the private sector? What information are they really seeking, and how are we seeing that translated then to whether they be voters or people in an audience to really keep them captivated?
Well, I think, like Peter said, it's not so much telling people what you're going to do or what you're going to do for them. It's presenting a vision that people can see themselves in and can see what they will get from it and how they can change or take that person's leadership and see it progress in a way that will benefit them and benefit the nation as a whole. So I think, you from the people, up here and in this room and anybody who works as a consultant, it's finding the words and the message and the visuals that stimulate that in people. And I think I'll take a great example, and I used it for something else in my own, but there was a spot that was done. It was called Morning in America for the Reagan presidency. And it was just basically, it's morning again in America, flags going up, and it just had this uplifting feel to it, kind of the music to it. The imagery was very, kind of bringing us home type of thing, and people read into it what they wanted to. It wasn't telling them, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. It just said, it's a new start today, and here we go, and we want you to be part of that new start. And so people were able to see into it what they wanted, and were able to then, move forward from there.
Excellent. Peter, would you like to add into that?
Yes, very critical, however, is the message has to be based on fact. In the 1970s, when Reagan became president, and full confession, I was a Democrat when I went to work for him. We had the nuclear freeze was being proposed by the Russians. We had 14% inflation, 21% interest rates. The SALT Treaty had not been signed, been withdrawn by Carter from the Congress because of the invasion of Afghanistan, though it was in trouble. It allowed the Russians to build up to 13,000 warheads from 2000 and 1970. That's not arms control. So what Reagan campaigned against Gerald Ford in 76 and against Carter, against détente and against peaceful coexistence, and against the SALT Treaty and against the ABM Treaty, what were the first two questions he got as his first press conference as President of the United States? I remember I was sitting in the back of the room. Mr. Burns from AP, who still hasn't learned anything, asked the president, are you going to stick to détente and peaceful coexistence? And that's where the president said, no, I'm not going to agree to something where the Russians run rampant all over the world. My strategy is we win, they lose. And when he said that, the gasp among the press corps in that room was audible. And that's what he did. He completely changed the narrative. On arms control, he said, what's arms control when they can build up to tens of thousands of nuclear weapons? He said, I'm for reductions. I'm for peace through strength. I'm for rollback. I'm going to help the Nicaraguan democratic resistance, which took a couple years. I'm going to help Solidarity in Poland. I'm going to help the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Grenada was the first property rolled back from the communist empire since 1917. That's why it was so important. It was a small country, but that was critical. Reagan, Thatcher, and the Pope completely changed the narrative, but they backed it up with solid activity, meaning Secretary Pompeo, who sits next to me over at the Hudson Institute, said, when you tell somebody what you're going to do and you do it, that means something to him, to the other guys we're trying to help. And so if your narrative has validity, it must be backed up by what you do. And people didn't think Reagan was serious, but he was. And the Democrats, as a Democrat, Jim Woolsey, CIA director, eventually, and our guy who wrote the Scowcroft Commission report, Democrat. General Rowney, who was our negotiator in Geneva, Democrat. Jeane Kirkpatrick, ambassador to the United Nations, Democrat. We could not have done that unless we had a bipartisan coalition. To me, in this town, that's key. You have that on Ukraine. But unless you have it, and you also base it up with solid action and activity, that'll work. But all the other things trying to do that, to me, is critical. And leadership is bringing the coalition of industry, think tanks, academia, politicians together. The media, I gave up on them a long time ago. If you just have a couple organs in the media, you'll be okay. But they, by and large, they're hopeless. But again, bipartisanship based on real fact. When you say you're going to do something, do it. And talk to people who you may not think agree with you. Because I up here in the Hill, as I said, I had over 1,500 seminars in these rooms. And I'd have anywhere from 50 to 125 members of Congress and their staff and others. Sometimes you get very surprised. Talk to everybody.
So let me build on a comment that Peter made there about Republicans and Democrats coming together in the Reagan administration to work on this issue. And Jay, you had mentioned in your opening remarks that you're not a Republican or a Democrat.
Mhm.
But we live and we work in a city right now that is increasingly polarized and divided. And we are really drawn by two battlegrounds. You are either an R or you're a D. There's not much room in the middle, right, unless you are Bernie Sanders and Kristen Sinema, right? And the space is closing in on them even more every single day. How do we address these complicated issues that obviously didn't originate in the 80s, but came to a pinnacle then, and now are reemerging as some of the most complicated issues that policymakers are facing, in doing it in a way where we can say we can solve this without being a Republican or a Democrat?
That's a very good question. I'm going to have a very cynical answer. I don't give a shit about who pees where. I give a hell of a lot about how we're going to win this battle with China in their attempt to completely dominate one part of this planet at the expense of democratic nations.
Agreed.
All right, so I can say I've just showed what my true colors are here. We argue about the wrong, stupid stuff at the expense of the really important. And our posture in this world, it doesn't take much to realize that all we do is go back 20 years. And this world was a completely different place than it is now. We were at the top of the food chain. We, Americans, whatever we wanted, we pretty much got around the world. And it's not that way anymore. And in that 20-year period, we've managed to run up, 35 on its way to $50 trillion in national debt, which means that either we're going to have to pay a lot more in taxes to pay for this, or we're going to have to reprioritize about how much of the social safety net gets covered. I'm going to come at this from a very kind of different angle. People like Reagan do not come along every cycle. He was a very unusual kind of president who had this foresight and these leadership skills, who happened to be in the right place at the right time and galvanized a nation. He came, I remember that campaign very well in 1980. He put stuff out there that seemed revolutionary to certain people. And he scared even some moderates in the Republican Party because he was so brash about it. But in hindsight, you look at that and you say, that was leadership. So most of the clients I have come to me, they find me online or they see my YouTube channel and they call me and they say, I want to run for office. And I'll tell you, this is kind of where it starts. I can tell within an hour of time whether they have any chance of winning and whether they're ever going to be a leader in politics by the way they answer certain questions. And in a sense, this is the way it starts with all of us who deal with public figures. Those that I know are going to succeed in public life say, when I ask them a question, what would you like to accomplish? Their answer surprises me because it isn't some piece of stuff they picked up out of the newspaper. It's not from some poll where they said, well, voters think inflation, immigration, and this are major issues. It's people who come and they have unique ideas about how we fix a certain problem or even what those problems are. So, translate this into the heart of your question. How do we fix this polarization so that we can operate it in one country? And I'll say that part of it is understanding how we got here. We are going through a massive demographic change in the United States. This conflict was inevitable. As you have on one side a population that is dead set about certain things and a younger generation that has completely different ideas. This is what will, in part, fix this, is a piece of this demographic is going to start dying in hordes over the next 10 years. And in fact, it may have already tipped the scales if you look at it, the way you see the emergence of voting trends in the United States. That's one of the things that will decrease the polarization. The other, God forbid, is a calamitous event that happens somewhere in the world that wakes everybody up, like 9/11, that shocked the country, which said, oh, holy shit, we've got to deal with this. We didn't see this coming. We have a calamity here. And that shocked the system for a period of time. And back in that day in New York City, I saw it didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat, I saw flags in the window. It was a completely different time. Usually, it takes one of those two things. One is going to be gradual, and another is going to shock us into our senses.
So Natalia, I want to ask, based off of some of the comments that Jay shared, coming from Montenegro and living and working in the Balkan states, do they look at the war in Ukraine as that seismic shift style of event, like a 9/11, something that can completely change and alter the landscape? Or do they look at it and see how can this be solved when leading powers of NATO, like the United States, are so deeply divided and making this issue almost becoming a partisan issue of Republicans in the United States versus Democrats in the United States on how to best resolve it? And what role do the Balkan states truly expect NATO and the large powers of NATO, such as the United States, to play beyond just writing checks?
It's a great question, and thank you. I will try address that in a couple of different points. The first one, perhaps the easiest one that comes to mind in terms of the U.S. leadership, is following up to the escalations that we've seen over the previous weeks between Kosovo and Serbia, is the big question of how do we maintain the integrity of the current borders in the Balkans. That's going to be the question that's on everybody's mind. We certainly want to do that without conflict. So that's in the Western Balkans the first, and then tying to that is the question of polarization, which is very much connected to the first one. So ideally, the Western Balkan space has gone through quite considerable reform over the last 15-20 years. So we're not in a space anymore, that perhaps what we look at in Russia and Ukraine. There's a lot of these processes we can do independently. But what is very critically difficult is this issue of polarization. And we're coming to a point where there's a narrative around, democracy versus authoritarianism that's emerging. And the question is really, how do we move beyond those frameworks and contain these processes in a peaceful way, so that we're not in a situation where we're revising. And I think there's a strong commitment to democracy and democratic processes, and there's a strong commitment to NATO and being part of Europe, and that has been more the case since what has happened in Ukraine. I think the situation in Ukraine has really woken a lot of the countries in the Western Balkans to that there is potential crisis.
Can I just usurp
Absolutely.
your power a little bit here? And because I think it's very interesting. The one person here at the table who has lived or lives currently in the part of the world where the American press has used this term to describe America currently is they would refer to it as the Balkanization of the United States. In your experience and what you can bring to this discussion, what can Americans do to avoid the pitfalls of this separate arguments and I'm right, you have to be wrong, so those type of things. A lot of the things that, we saw between a lot of the former Yugoslavian and Balkan countries. What can Americans do to avoid the pitfalls that part of the world went through?
It's really interesting because when you look at the patterns, I did not expect this to come around full circle in some ways, because having seen that Balkanization start, in the 90s, and then we have come to this place where, in Western Balkans the processes are very different now. But for here, I really think that the best way to sort of see it is to sort of try to maintain the integrity of whatever stakeholder you are representing, whether it's the private sector, whether it's the advocacy groups, whatever interest group you are representing, to do that in a way that's not black and white. So this point about ambiguity comes back again, and I think that is going to be critical to sort of breaking this narrative fragmentization, and I think ambiguity here is helpful, but also sort of finding what is that tying, what is tying the underneath, like these younger demographics and their asks. How do we sort of bring that to surface and address it proactively? In a sort of unifying way, without entirely taking off the benefits of what the older generations have accomplished. I would say that I think the fragmentation is. I would certainly not, and I will close here. Certainly, I don't think from the experience from the Western Balkans is the process we've been through, and where we've ended is that the institutions become very flattened, and you don't end up in a situation where you have a lot of leverage to make progress, if that comment makes sense, right? And because you go through that process, you don't have a lot of leverage to be a stakeholder internationally. Like you've mentioned, the U.S. was in a position where, you were a leader 20 years ago, and to maintain that leadership, you have to sort of take a stake of what you have, and sort of bring that through unity instead of sort of trying to do away with it. So that's for my political speech.
So I want to bring in, and I apologize that I had not had him introduce himself at the beginning, my very good friend Stephen Blank, who is dialing in virtually to today's events. And I'd like him to introduce himself, but before he does, I want him to really build off of this conversation that we've just had. And Stephen, what I think the audience would be curious for is your thoughts on the comment was made about a seismic shift style event. And while we all probably do believe that the Balkan states especially do look at the invasion of Ukraine as that, but it has not been maybe that same extent as 9/11 was. In your opinion, is the Russian invasion that seismic shift event, or would something of a China invasion of Taiwan take that place?
Well, those are two separate questions, so let me deal with those. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Second, I wish I could be with you, but I had knee replacement surgery 2 weeks ago, not quite 2 weeks ago, so I'm unable to get down to the district, though I live in Silver Spring, so I'm doing this by Zoom. In answer to Adam's question, I think the Ukraine war, as it goes on, will come to be seen as another seismic shift, because the repercussions of the war are by no means confined to Ukraine. And the longer this goes on, the longer that globalization of outcomes relating to it will continue. And what's more, many of those trends will become more consolidated. To give you one, the Russo-Chinese alliance, I happen to be one that believes it's an alliance, is stronger, particularly in the military sphere, than it ever has been. And Russia is much more dependent on China than it ever has been. And that's a fundamental shift in global and especially Asian politics. And that could lead me to answer the second question. If China decided to invade Taiwan sometime in the near or even immediate future, that would have an equally consequential impact on international relations because of the fact that we live in a globalized economy, and that's not going to go away despite what many call a retreat from globalization. Major wars are bound to have ramifications that go far beyond their borders, whether it would be let's say Israel-Iran hypothetically, or China-Taiwan, and in the Ukrainian case. Those would have major impacts on international relations, not just on the regions in which those wars would occur. So, Adam, I hope that answers your question, and I appreciate your asking me to contribute to that, because as you and some of the other people there know, I was a professor for many years at the Army and Air War colleges here in the United States. So I try to combine the political and military levels of analysis together.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And since we did not have you at the very beginning, can you take a brief moment and introduce yourself as well? I know you just gave us a quick preview of your history and your career, but if you want to add a few more comments to that.
Okay, well, I am now a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, which is based in Philadelphia. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area, and as I said, temporarily somewhat limited in my mobility, but I've been a watcher of Soviet Union and now Russia for about 45 years. So I have a lot of experience teaching Russia's impact on international relations and issues relating to Russian military and contemporary warfare. I taught at the Air War College, the Army War College, University of California, Riverside, University of Texas, San Antonio, and now I'm an independent consultant and connected to FPRI.
Thank you so much, Stephen. We appreciate it. I want to turn to one other question, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Natalia, in some of the comments that you made, we're looking now at the war entering a new stage, right? The heavily discussed spring offensive seems to is beginning in its commencement. We've seen so much take place throughout the European continent over the last year and a half. Are the Balkan states looking at NATO, even after now its recent expansion and pending continued expansion with new member states? How do they look at NATO in the future? Do they see NATO as the most pivotal piece to solving problems throughout the European continent, especially in the Balkan regions? Or is NATO starting to wane in what they believe how effective it can be, and they're going to start to look to potential other sources of support?
That's another excellent question. So I think with respect to NATO, it's important that we keep to the first. It is a guarantee of stability and territorial integrity for a lot of especially in the Balkans, but also in Europe. I think the scenario where countries start looking at alternative sources of support becomes increasingly challenging and a cause of instability and risks. So I think that there is potential as there's lack of leadership and ability to move through these processes and increase, we were talking about authoritarianism as that is more of a challenge and a demand for internal reforms, essentially. And as those are not being met, there's then looking to alternative sources of support. But I think what we lack is sort of proactive leadership so that we're not in that situation or 4 years from now or 5 years from now.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. So, building off of your comment, Peter, NATO is obviously entering a new chapter in the organization's history. One that you can draw several parallels to, the time of Reagan, and also some stark differences. Where do you see NATO's focus moving in this war? Does NATO start to look at this as a problem that is going to have to be solved beyond our current strategy? We're going to have to employ new tactics? Or does NATO continue to drive forward under the same strategy that it has been using, hoping that this will eventually wear down Russian forces?
So it's a good question. I do want to say Steve Blank has spoken at my seminar series probably around 30 times. And when I need a Russian expert to tell Congress what the threat is, that's who I go to. He is the best. He also speaks Russian, and it's wonderful to hear him. And his colleague Mark Schneider, who I should put a plug in, knows where all the weapons are and what Russia's doing. Steve knows what they're going to do with the weapons. Now, your question goes to the guts of what we're facing in NATO. As you notice, the United States and other NATO countries have said, we don't want to give Ukraine too much weaponry, because that will upset Putin. Well, Putin's already upset. Look what he's done to Ukraine. Bombed hospitals, bombed schools, kidnapped children, raped women left and right. It's not an issue getting upset. So if you're not going to win the war, here's the problem. We just went through 20 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, albeit it was eventually low grade, but who runs Iraq now? Iran, a lot of it. Who runs Afghanistan? The Taliban. So the American people are going to say, wait a minute, you just sold us the same deal. The first takedown of Saddam was brilliant. The takedown of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda was brilliant. You've seen the Horse Warriors movie. Okay, that was the military's job. The next job was the politicians to figure out, okay, then what? You can't take Afghanistan and turn it into Rhode Island. Yet we were going to build democracy. Sorry, you can't do it. So are you going to do the same thing with Ukraine? Because every week the war goes on, Russia's not getting blown away. Cities in Russia are not getting bombed. Ukraine, you're losing more and more people, you more infrastructure, more and more of their economy, which is going to take literally trillions of dollars to rebuild. And we haven't, as a country and as a NATO, as an organization, we have not said to the American people, this is our objective. It's to kick Russia out of Crimea and out of eastern Ukraine. Fine. Then say that. And then say, here's our plan. And implement it and do it. Because right now, we have hesitancy within NATO, and we've gone to the lowest common denominator. When in 81, we were told, let Russia keep SS-20s. They've deployed almost 1,800 of them. We can't get support from Europe unanimously to deploy Pershings and Glickums. And Reagan pounded the table and said, hell no. And against the advice of a lot of people, he went and deployed, and the Russians walked out of the arms control talks. Gorbachev decided to deploy even more SS-20s. And what did we get? We got 0-0, which we were told was a trick, that we knew the Russians would reject it, and therefore we proposed it so we didn't have to have arms control. When in fact it was exactly the opposite. We put on the table what we needed, which was we would not let Russia intimidate and try to break NATO apart by deploying SS-20s because he thought we could have division. Now, we had Thatcher, not Neil Kinnock. We had Mr. Kohl, and not Gensler. And we had Pope John, and not a liberation theologian. And we had Reagan, not Carter. Now, I don't want to be partisan on this, but there's a big difference between that four triumvirate and what they accomplished miraculously with enormous Democratic help. House of Representatives was 250 some odd Democrats, 170 Republicans. Okay, I needed 54 Democrats to win a vote in the House because I was going to lose some Republicans. And that was one of my jobs, to go count votes. Okay, and we couldn't be partisan on this issue. So NATO's problem, as I see it, is they haven't decided to win this war. And my friend Steve Blank is I think, answered very well. What happens if we win? My worry, and it still is Putin crazy and reckless enough to use nuclear weapons to try to forestall defeat? And the question is, I think before he loses, he will be removed from power, and the Russian security forces and the military will withdraw because they don't want to see a collapse of the Russian military.
So let me take a comment that you made. I'm going to pose a piece of that to Leif, and then I'm going to close this discussion with Jay, with you. Leif, Peter brought up the issue of, what is the overall objective? Is it driving Putin and Russia out of Crimea and the eastern parts of Ukraine? Is it to win the war overall? From your perspective as a professional who really specializes in messaging and the development, has the United States and NATO not done a good job of messaging what this conflict is and what the overall goal and objective is for the conflict?
I think they've done a good job of being as vague as they possibly could, because number one, if they say and put out a plan, here is our goal out of Crimea, stop Russian aggression, they're not going to reform the satellites of the former Soviet Union, that would give the Russians, aha, we told you, this is a war against us. It always has been. That's why we went into Ukraine, because we knew they were going to start positioning their short-range missiles in Ukraine, and we were right, which I think then emboldens the Russian people a little bit more to believe the propaganda that Putin is putting out. But what I found interesting with Peter's discussion was he named all the people who brought about the arms limitations with the Russians, and most of them, I don't think it was anybody surprised anybody, most of them at the time were conservative Republicans, or what was known as a conservative Republican then. Today in the United States, you would find conservative Republicans on the opposite side of this today. We don't want to fight Russia. We don't want to support Ukraine. We think this is hands off. We don't want anything, primarily because we've just come out of 20 years of war that saw us relinquish everything that we went in there to do. So you have a very, I don't know if I want to say how large of a minority, but it's a vocal minority in the far-right conservative Republican wing of the party that says we should not give any more money and any more arms, and this should not be a fight. And it's also the group of people who say we should get out of NATO or cut back our role in NATO altogether.
Just 1 point. The chairman, the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate is Mr. Risch from Idaho. Totally in support of this war, very conservative. The ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, Mr. Wicker, is from Mississippi. He's 100% in favor of the war. And I know because we had him, both of them together at Hudson, and they were very, very strong, very adamant about this. And their central point was, we need a plan that says, what's our objective? We don't tell them how we're going to do it, but what's our objective? He said the absence of that, by saying we're in it for as long as it takes, understood. That's a signal saying we're going to give up. But you have to have a plan to get this done, because I think you lose the support of the American people eventually if you don't.
It's a good point.
I really worry about that.
It's a good point, but we're also now facing the fact that 11 Republicans have frozen the governing ability of the House of Representatives currently.
I hear you.
So even with those people in positions of leadership, there are, I think, probably a conservative number would say at least 20 Republicans and maybe a few Democrats who are not in favor of sending any more military aid to the Ukraine. And in fact, the Speaker of the House has said any further increase in that support would have to go through an entirely new process. We're not going to just extend more money and more support. We'll have to find, we'll have to bring that up before for some more debate. So it's. I think you're completely right here. There is still strong support because there's a group of people who know what this is all about.
We can get that.
But there are a lot of people, I call them the Kardashians of politics today, who like to say something just to get a social ping out of it, or on the evening news that they can then put out a letter to raise some money with. And that's what we're facing.
So Jay, the issues obviously become very, very partisanly divided, right? And we're seeing, as Leif mentioned, currently 11 Republicans are holding up the House of Representatives from executing its legislative agenda. We saw in the negotiations that came out and resulted from the debt ceiling deal, the cap on military spending. And we saw that Republicans and Democrats in the Senate were very unhappy with this and believe that the best way to change that is through that supplemental package that would likely be tied to a Ukraine defense package.
Right.
What is the likelihood, from your perspective and with the policymakers that you've worked with, that you see something of that nature working its way through this bitterly divided Congress?
Well, look, the problem sometimes forces the hand of people who'd rather not deal with it. Ronald Reagan was handed a Social Security problem in his lap. He didn't want to do it, and neither did Tip O'Neill. But it was hot, and when it landed in his lap, he picked up the phone and called O'Neill and said, we're going to have to fix this. And they came together, and they did. So here's our reality. The thinkers who would look at this world and how it may evolve are going to turn around someday and said, my God, had we not gone to aid Ukraine, half of the so-called NATO alliance would wonder about our commitment to them.
Yeah,
And-
politics would be next.
And yes, Russia wouldn't be where it is now without the help of China. It's not hard to figure out how these dominoes are going to fall. And for us to maintain our influence in the world, we need a Europe that believes that America is their superpower. And they're not going to believe that if we abandon the cause of the Ukraine. So how does this work itself out? It comes down to a microcosm of what happens right now. Everything matters, but these tides are going to shift. Look at the difference between 2016, 2018, 2020, and 22. All fought by very close margins, but at some point it will break. At some point, North Carolina is going to turn blue. And someday in our lifetime, so will Texas. What really matters in terms of national leadership comes down to 6 or 7 different states that determine the outcome of the Electoral College. Underneath that, one of these things that makes us more like Europe in this sense than the American politics it used to be, is we're voting increasingly along party lines, just like they do in the UK. It used to be that you could appeal to independents and expect to get some crossover votes. So we'll have to work through this. And like I say, it will either take a calamity to force us to do it before we're ready to, or we'll piss all over each other for a few more election years until one side begins to emerge.
So, Stephen, to close out this question, is the challenge that Congress is facing on addressing the issue of continued funding and support for Ukraine, are they plagued with poor messaging, or are there a large enough group, may not be a majority, but a large enough group that is loud enough that is just truly misinformed on what the true goals are of Russia and the danger and peril that could pose to Eastern Europe, the entire continent, and the United States?
Well, in my opinion, am I muted? No, in my opinion, first of all, there has been a failure by the administration to articulate the strategic goals of what we are trying to do in Ukraine.
Exactly.
And to say that we support a Ukrainian victory. And by that, I mean the restoration of the integrity of the Ukraine before 2014 and its independence and sovereignty, which would necessarily mean its inclusion in NATO, European Union, and other European security organizations, and to explain why this is in the national interest. That has not been done. Now, I think there's a reason for that, although I disagree with it. I think it's because the Biden administration is afraid that the coalition in Europe might fracture if we did that, because
Exactly.
if you look at Europe means nothing in a geopolitical sense, as Bismarck said 120 years ago, but it does mean that there are factors in European politics that are not convinced that this is necessarily what we should be aiming at. And if we start saying that we could fracture the alliance. That said, I don't think that these minority Republicans, or for that matter, the less vocal left-wing minority, which doesn't have, I don't think, any real traction outside of maybe 1 or 2 think tanks in Washington, don't understand what Russia's up to. I don't think they care.
Yes.
That's almost even more dangerous.
Should be involved
Unfortunately.
in this period. Outside of a few individuals in these places, and I could name them, I don't think most of them think about what Russia's up to. Now, what disturbs me, and other commentators have pointed this out, is that a lot of what you hear from the conservative Republican elements sounds like it was made in Moscow. I don't think that's the case.
Institutions in such a way to satisfy everybody's demands without those institutions being in serious jeopardy. I think, you know, there's all constraints that you can think of, right? So it's not so much that the message is not being heard. It's a lot. There's a lot of sort of miscommunication, but there's also sort of actual, you know, questions on how do you accomplish these internal reforms with the institutions you have. I think that's a question that's, you know, to be dealt with, right? Like, I think proactively. I think with the younger generation, I don't think anybody's sort of closed off to that desire to do that. I would say.
Peter, did you want to add a comment to Ed's question?
Yeah, two ways I can answer this. I took a look in the 70s. 23 countries flipped from pro-West to pro-communist, with except in Iran. You have to figure out what they went from the Shah to Khomeini, and though he wasn't necessarily pro-communist, he did work with the communists. And they all flipped almost entirely due to Russian and Chinese money and weapons. So, one white, one non-white. To me, it's immaterial. The issue to me is at the end of the Bush 41 administration, and I say this as having spent a lot of time in Salvador defeating the FMLN and seeing the horrible destruction that they and Hezbollah and the Soviet Union and Cubans did. Every country from Canada to Chile was a democratically elected government in 1992, except for two, Cuba and Haiti. Now look where we are. Bolivia, Venezuela, Colombia's in trouble, Brazil, God, Lula, disaster, Nicaragua, Cuba, and they all are exporting terrorism, drugs, and revolution. We may not be very effective in stopping it, true, but we often say, oh, we don't want to interfere. But on the other hand, the bad guys, they get a vote, and they're always interfering. And particularly the Chinese now, they've added to the weapons of economics, the buying up, giving them huge amounts of loan, saying you can buy $1 billion literally worth of Chinese stuff, and you owe it to us, but they can't pay it back, and they say, oh, by the port you have, it's ours.
Exactly.
And then they say the banking system, oh, that's ours. The IT system, how you communicate with people, oh, we now control it. So they control the messaging, they control trade. They say, oh, bottoms that carry American goods, they can't come into this port. Okay? And they said banking system, who gets money and who doesn't. You've heard of social scores. Well, they do that too. If you're against their government, China will make sure they don't get banking privileges. So we fell down on our, you're right, sir, we fell, after the end of the Cold War, as General Herensack said, we took a holiday. We just said at the end of a few comments, at the end of politics, there's no liberalism, it's all going to be democratic institutions and human rights and everything, and we went to sleep. And then unfortunately 9/11 happened, and while the initial reaction was brilliant, we then got mired down in 20 some odd years of spending trillions of dollars and just not paying attention to business, which is where we are today, unfortunately. And I know I supported taking the Taliban down, but I don't know. I know some of the guys who rode those horses with laptops, talking to B-52s at 42,000 feet, dropping JDAMs on the bad guys. And as Rumsfeld said, we had 19th century horses, we had 18th century, the 18th and 19th century horses, 20th century B-52s, and 21st century JDAMs. Pretty remarkable. But again, we lost sight of, okay, once you take them down, then as Colin Powell said, once you break it, it's yours. And we forgot about what we were going to do next. And as I said, I thought it was pretty remarkable. Human Rights Watch said every country from Canada to Chile were democratically elected, except for 2. And then you take that where we were, which was the achievement at the end of the Cold War. The Russians didn't have a lot of money. They were kind of withdrawn. And it's instead of taking advantage of it, we kind of assume that it's the natural condition of people, which is not. And look where we are today.
So let me turn to Katerina. I know we are over our time,
Yeah,
and we have another panel
5
ready to
minutes
start.
more, but I have one concept question which correlates with function of our association. So you work with think tanks, you work with political campaigns, with advocacy. So do you see correlation, do you see connection between developed institutions of government relations, lobbying, transparent processes, democracy elections, and so on and so forth, and also situations evolve? Because on my theory, and we're trying to do that in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, we moving forward best practices of campaign management, of government relations, of lobbying law, to do these countries, more, to bring more competition to this market. So do you see this correlation? And do we need, for example, push more governments in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Africa to bring these practices, for example, practices of transparent financing of political forces, practices of voting for lobbying law, and so on and so forth? Or just every country have their own way? Unfortunately, we haven't today speakers from the United Arab Emirates, but 2 years ago we have our forum in United Arab Emirates, and they explore that their way of dialogue with power is different. It's not like Western type of lobbying. So do we need to continue this work in some countries and we bring them to good, or they just okay with their own way? So, yeah.
And to be mindful of the next panel, I'm going to limit each answer to 1 minute.
Yeah.
I would say that, it's all politics is local. There's a saying that I'm sure everybody uses it too, but in the United States, all politics is local. What works here and in a lot of Western European countries probably is not going to work in the Middle East and a lot of the traditional and social philosophies that they follow. So what we best can hope for is what we've kind of got over the last couple of years is engagement on a transparent level, accepting where they are and them accepting where we are and meeting where we can. I think that's the best we can hope for on a lot of those type of levels. We really can't force democracy on some areas. We just have to find a way of working with them.
We have enough of our own problems trying to refine our own democracy and make it work. And I would be very skittish about looking at a functional democracy that somehow makes it work and telling them how to change it for the better until we get our own house in order. So we got our hands full here. If they're an ally, if they like us, good. Do your own thing and do it your way.
Those in glass houses, huh?
Yeah.
I fully agree. I think that democratic processes, keeping to transparency, rule of law, I think that's keeping to those processes is going to be the path forward. Yeah.
I think our biggest problem is that we didn't realize the bad guys who didn't want to vote figured out, one vote, one time, one man. Look at Bolivia. Look at Nicaragua. Okay, they have elections. The first one, Evan Morales in Bolivia won. How it was crooked, I don't know, but here's cocaine dealer but he just stayed there, okay? And that's what these bad guys decided to do. Use the electoral process and pretend to be open, and then forever beyond that, you'll never have a free election. And we didn't pay attention to that.
Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panel. We really appreciate your time this evening and the insights that you've shared. It's been a great conversation. We'll take a quick pause for the next panel to commence.
Thank you, guys.
Our second panel is focusing on women's leadership. Thank you. Thank you.
And
Women's leadership in government relations, advocacy, lobbying, and associations and sectoral associations. So we have tremendous interest in speakers from different sectors, and I will ask also our speakers introduce themselves. But firstly, I give to you interesting points from statistics. So today it's not so big problems of women's leadership here in DC, but so every 6 places from top lobbyists in DC, it's women, so pretty good. And Center of Representative Politics also count that women represent more clients. So one woman represents more clients as a lobbyist than men. So it's interesting. And if compared with European Union, it's 25% of all lobbyists who register. It's women. So not so good situation. And we know that it's still challenging because women mostly do like advocacy work, and in European Union, as you know, also religious organization register as a lobbyist. So, and if we spoke about market of Eastern Europe and Central Asia and Africa, it's less women who work in this sector, and of course less women who represent their interest in parliament and in central power. So if you're interested about this discussion, you can find on IGAPA.net our previous discussion. It was 7th Government Relations Forum, and we have a lot of numbers, a lot of cases about women's leadership in parliaments in different countries. But today we will give a chance to the best professionals from sector give their perspective on this issue, how women can work in government relations sector, also represent their cases in advocacy and represent their cases in related professions, I mean in public relations work and so on and so forth. So let's move forward to short introduction of every speaker. So please, every speaker have 1 minute to represent themselves. Of course, mostly guests and our Zoom community and all community which have our newsletter have your bias, but it's better to know you in person, you know, so please 1 minute to every speaker to represent themselves, their work, and points which they want to focus on. So Sarah, can we start from you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Oh, take the mic. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Faye Pierce. I am the head of government relations for a company called Paychex. We're a human capital management solutions company, and so we provide a broad array of HR services and payroll for small businesses across the country. And so we have 730,000 small business clients in the United States and in Northern Europe. I have about 20 plus years of experience in advocacy and government relations, and have worked in corporate advocacy as well as served in senior leadership roles for major national and international trade associations, and very pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining.
Hello everyone, thank you for this conference. It's a very important topic, and right now for Ukraine it's very neat, and I'm very happy that we have today so international guests. It's amazing. My name is Julia Gershon. I'm Ukrainian diplomat, TV presenter, and ambassador UNICEF, and also head of International Humanitarian Organization Peace Committee of Ukraine.
Hi everyone, I'm Deborah Skolnick-Einhorn. I'm the head of school, the school down the road. It's called Milton Gottesman Jewish Day School of our nation's capital. I have the longest name among heads of school, and then our school also has the longest name. We take pride in that. But when we're looking at other schools around the nation, we are the only Jewish day school that's actually in Washington, D.C. We have colleagues in Rockville and the suburbs, but we're the only one in DC proper. We're a pluralistic Jewish day school, meaning we have a full range, a diverse range of Jewish and a few non-Jewish students and faculty who really contribute to a sense of community and service for education and community service in DC.
Hello for everyone. I'm Helena Petrushka. I'm from Lviv, from Ukraine.
Hi, my name is Stephen Blank. I was having a problem. It seems to disappear. I was just reading my subscriptions for today. I ran into a problem, so I bought it. Now it's come back up. I don't know if I still need your help, but it seems to
You
be
can mute, you can just mute him.
working now.
So all interesting scandals and news from the same situation. I'm sorry, Galina. Yes,
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm communication director in one of the biggest energy company in Ukraine, and which cover 1 million clients, customers. And this winter, I must admit, this winter was the most difficult period of my career, because, you know, Russia attacked Ukraine, and Russia attacked civilian infrastructure, and I work like a PR director. I must define this Russia propaganda, and that's why it was very difficult. If it will be interesting for you, I will tell about my experience.
For sure, that's why we invite you to this So, Mrs. Saidi also joined us by Zoom. So it's your 1 minute introduction.
Sure. I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. Katerina, my name is Joki Saidi. I'm a member of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. I'm also formerly, when I in town, traveling extensively, adjunct professor, most recently at the University of Baltimore. Specialty is international relations, and that's kind of a short bio. Katarina, because I do have time limitation, unfortunately, having to leave at 6, any comments that I can make at the beginning, if you can accommodate that, I'll be more than happy, and then hopefully those time, and I'll still be here for any questions and answers.
Okay, sure. Then the first question will be to you, but I will ask one more lady to join us. So it's Lada. Lada, we invite you also to this panel. Can you represent yourself? We know that it's late night in your, in Kyiv, yes? So please represent yourself and join our panel. Okay, we'll wait until Lada. So then my first question. Yeah, Lada.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. My name is Lada, Dr. Lada Roslitsky, and I am the founder of a defense and security company focused on developing Ukraine as a keystone in global defense and security success. So I will be speaking to you today about leadership in the defense sector in Ukraine and what is lacking, and how we could potentially develop the private sector in industry in Ukraine.
Thank you so much. So then first question will be to Mrs. Saidi. So you represent Foreign Affairs Committee at National Council of Resistance of Iran. And I know from our previous work and conversation that you do a lot of advocacy work on the Hill. And it's more than 20 years you do that, as I know. So can you shortly, like 3 to 5 minutes, explain how you do that, and maybe share some cases from your work? For example, we advocate this issue and we get this bill, so this decision, and yes, it's not easy to do this advocacy on Iranian question when you're woman, and it's not easy to engage people from Iran, no, because of authoritarian regime there. So can you also share your leadership experience in this work and share your story in this short 5 minutes? Thank you.
Sure. It's a very important question you're asking, but I think there are many different aspects to that question. I'll first kind of quickly respond to what you mentioned, and I will tie that in with regards to why is it that the topic of Iranian women, the topic of leadership in this panel. By the way, I'm really happy to be among this distinguished panel to be speaking to you. And why is it that the topic of women's leadership, Iran, Ukraine for that matter, and also advocacy and leadership is tied together? This has been for us in Iran, because this has been a span of 50 years of kind of dictatorship. We have had the monarchist in power, as well as then after the Iranian Revolution, we had the current religious dictatorship, the theocracy in place. So that combination has created a massive resistance, and unfortunately, we have an organized resistance. It's not been born overnight. That organized resistance, both inside Iran and outside Iran, has been extremely active. Very well organized networks of activity, compatriots outside Iran. So, for instance, in Washington, D.C., there is huge activity of a network of Iranians who are from our persuasions and activities in terms of careers, who have been organized in terms of advocacy work with regards to bills on human rights and foreign policy matters that are being presented to both houses. We've had recently great success, for instance, in Resolution 100, that had both parties signing on to as a majority, kind of talking about the future of Iran, condemning human rights violations. Not only that, but also addressing the topic of women's leadership, in particular a personality that I will speak quickly about, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, who is the leader of the Iranian resistance. So that's pretty much why we're able to channel the advocacy work, and not only in DC, but also these are chapters of the organization that are spreading throughout the U.S., pretty much in every state, and they're obviously speaking and engaging with the representatives on that level to ask them for their support on these initiatives. This has been going on, again, because of the nature of the prolonged work and resistance and human rights advocacy on many levels for the past decades. And we wish that we would have had, the change in the regime and the government and democracy sooner. But that, in reverse, has enabled the organized activity to be very strong, very robust, and very experienced. So that's been a contribution to a leadership, I would say, in terms of advocacy, as well as the organizational steadfastness of the people who believe that what they're working on is really worthwhile and they want to continue. When we talk about leadership, obviously, and in this panel, it's important to know we have a very unique example in the Middle East for the entire women population of the world. We have a political leadership of an organization by women. We have the majority of the organized resistance leaders as women. As well, and this is documented. They've been very vocal about it. We've had conferences and workshops, shared experiences. When it comes to a personality like myself, a person within the National Council of Resistance now, which is comprised of 52% women of 500. That is an amazing achievement within the Middle East. You have on one hand a brutal dictatorship of the mullahs who are really the brunt of their dictatorship is against women particularly. I'm sure I'm not going to take up the time to repeat the information about Mahsa Amini, the past September, the revolt that suddenly created an upheaval and women at the forefront against the mullah dictatorship in Iran. And that is really speaking to the long-lasting work that has been at the grassroots level inside and outside Iran being planted. And suddenly it manifested it. We do have network of resistance units that are also led by women inside Iran. They're been pretty much now to 5,000. These are people from all ranks within Iranian society who want to do something about their own future. So you can see the role of women and the leadership and their really pretty much steadfast organizing for women in this. And do I have time or should I finish right now?
I have additional question to you. It's no to this point. Do you see difference between cultural map? Because when you do advocacy here, you mostly work with people who have it's mostly classical American background. So all issues which you describe, when you describe these issues and do advocacy and do your work, do you have some challenges which connect with cultural map?
I would say at the beginning, yes.
Yeah.
And the only difference is, and first of all, we have had to over the years overcome the cultural language barrier and have a deep understanding of the political network and really kind of get education in terms of how the policy makers work and what the policy, how it's developed, the personalities and characters, particularly within the Red Line and in DC, and have established relationship with them so that they feel like they understand the cause and they have good information. But that information has been continuous. It's not been one time. It's been visits to the office. It's been establishing that relationship and understand what the need is and what the questions are so that we can have the right answer and responses. But I would say it's a continuity of getting to know them and become really an extended member of their team in terms of providing information on a timely manner so that they feel like they can go to you and answer, get the answer to the questions that they have. Because they feel like you are so grassroots and so connected with inside that you can have the fresh information and up-to-date information for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for these insights, and I hope we will see you because last time Mrs. Saidi also joined Ukrainian Advocacy Days on the Hill, so we have some meetings about women leadership in this sector also with Mrs. Part, so thank you for the support and thank you for your work. So we move into Sarah, and Sarah, one of the best government relations and professionals and lobbyists here on the Hill. So now she works for a company which on NASDAQ, so it's very huge company, leader in their sector. So, Sarah, can you share with us some your experience? Is it hard for you to work in this sector as a woman, or it's just no difference? And maybe also some insights and some challenges which you have in your government relations work, and is it challenges for you as a woman, or it just challenges for all people in profession? And maybe you also can share some interesting case to us and how you're moving forward with this case.
Sure.
Please use this microphone if it's possible, and I also will ask all colleagues who on Zoom to mute yourself when we have speaker in our audience. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the question. You know, the thought comes to mind, miles to go before we sleep, and certainly, I was trying to do math in my head, but I am a lobbyist because I can't do math, but 23, 24, 25 years that I've been here in Washington, D.C., and to see the tide shift from the opportunity that as women wasn't necessarily available in 1998 to the opportunity that I have now to lead government relations for a $5 billion company, 16,000 employees, 750,000 clients across this country. And it's an incredible honor, but it's been an incredible journey and a hard-fought journey. And what's very important is to demonstrate your capability, to demonstrate your leadership qualities, to always have done your research, to always have your facts straight, to always have a compelling story to tell, to be able to really bring in your audience, and whether your audience is members of Congress on Capitol Hill, their staff, whether it's a coalition that you're building of other trade associations and other companies who have similar interests, that you have everything lined up, and so you're able to build a reputation of honesty, integrity, and the ability to be a very transparent dealer, and then you build that reputation up over time. But certainly it's not easy being female in Washington, D.C. and working in politics, and there's a very unsavory side of it, and I'll save those stories for a different time. But to know and see just within the last 5 years an incredible amount of new opportunity being presented for women leaders in Washington, D.C. Now we're seeing, heads of major trade associations, the C-suite being filled with women. We're seeing many heads of government relations for major companies on the NASDAQ, Fortune 500 companies. And so women are starting to take the lead and really stepping into these inner circles and really demonstrating the capability to advance public policy here in Washington. And so, it's certainly a bright day, but it's taken 25 years to get there. And where you see a male counterpart, their trajectory takes much less time, 10 years, 15 years perhaps. And so there's a lot of work to continue to do as I started out, miles to go. But I think we have a good story to tell, and just to recognize the value that we can bring, and just continue to demonstrate it. And just a couple of vignettes that I was thinking through about how to make sure that as a female leader, when you're in different circles, and particularly when you're in coalitions, because a lot of people say this is still a male-dominated town, and I would agree with that. And when you're contributing as you're developing strategy or having in-depth policy conversations, I've found quite frequently when I interject with an idea about a strategic move or just make a contribution to the conversation, and sometimes it just falls silent and there's no response. A few minutes later, a man will say exactly the same thing that I had just said, and everybody will go wild for it. And it used to be such a source of frustration for me, and finally I decided to speak up. And rather than confronting, I would say, "Gee, Bob, I'm so glad you agree with what I just said. I agree, it's a great idea, maybe we should pursue it." And so just to try to think about creative and clever ways, so you're not closing the door on someone, but you're opening the door and inviting more collaboration and teamwork.
Thank you. What you think, because some people said that women's, they better lobbyists, because it's no competence, because men's always competitors. And for example, when member of Congress meet with men who represent, I don't know, oil association, oil and gas association, they are little competitors. So do you think that in some way women can do better advocacy and lobbying work because they have more soft skills, or it just doesn't matter?
I do not agree that men have more soft skills than women. I
think
the opposite. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. We have to be versatile. Versatility is what keeps us in that circle, keeps us in the arena, is to be versatile. And so the expectation on a female coming into those circles and engaging with members of Congress, I think about it all the time. I have to be funny. I have to be able to talk about sports. I have to be able to talk about the policy. I have to know all the players on the field. And I have to have all of that down better than the man, because they come into that situation and they're just kind of, rubbing elbows, and they're, joking and jawing around about whatever it is among the guys. And so to me, I've always, tried to come into that circle and not necessarily become one of the guys, but be able to hang with the guys. And it's really critical, because you want to stay inside the circle of influence. And so really figuring out your strategy just as an operator to get inside that circle and then stay there. And so how do you build that inclusion? How do you quick study about sports? We're closing out on the hockey season, baseball season's getting underway. Like, what are the quick headlines that you can just kind of interject, and then suddenly they want to keep you in that circle. And it might sound a little trite, but it will really help you down the road, as she just talked about, building those relationships and then being an extension of the office or being the extension of the staff or the member of Congress is how you win. And you might not necessarily win that day, but you might win 2 to 4 to 5 weeks or 2 to 4 to 5 years down the road.
Thank you. So all people who taken part in Ukrainian advocacy days look baseball before, so this will help you. Thank you so much for these insights. It's really very resonate, I think, with all of us who work in this sector. And thank you for your inspiration and for your taking part in also different women's leadership programs for professionals from Eastern Europe, Central Asia. For Ukrainians, it's very helpful. So we will move into Deborah. She work with issues which important for independent schools, and interest of independent schools, of some questions which connect with women's rights. It's classical advocacy work. I know that you do a lot of work on different level of this advocacy, so can you share your cases maybe for the last 5 years, what you advocate, how you do that, and maybe what's the difference between tools on local level, on state level, and on federal level?
Okay, great. This is only my 3rd year on the job. So although I started in July 2020 as the head of school, so for anyone who followed the news, it was not an easy time to enter. So I consider it dog years. So I'm in year 15, completing year 15. And it's interesting, I'm the 3rd head of school at Milton, and we've all been women. So it is, and probably 90% of our employees are women. And so that's been a women's leadership role. And it's complicated as we think about it. As I think about succession down the road, is the complexities of being led by a man if you're such a women-heavy institution, and how that could feel to a group, a large group of women who are in education. So I want to talk a little bit about the work within the school and then the work outside of the school. I'll start outside, because vis-a-vis COVID and Washington, D.C., and us, again, being the only Jewish school in Washington, D.C., we have an interesting relationship. Washington was very, very strict, for those of us who live here, very strict about COVID, and we did not, as an independent school in DC, have independence on most of our decisions in terms of the choices that we were making in terms of social distancing or masking or vaccine policies. And what's interesting now is, as we're turning out of it, there are still vaccine policies, and there's actually the opportunity for religious exemption from the vaccine from Washington. And we as a school have said that we're a Jewish day school. There is not a Jewish exemption. So we're not going to honor a religious exemption, but the city is saying that they will honor the religious exemption. So it feels a bit of a church and state complexity for us, and we're the only ones dealing with that from a Jewish perspective in the city, and we're really trying to assert our independence to be able to make that decision to protect our community. So in the I think in the fields, regionally, I have a school of 465 students, 120 employees, nothing like the size of institutions that you guys are working on. But of course, we impact 1,000 parents and many thousands of graduates and alumni families. And we're also really working within a wider national system of Jewish day schools, and see our position in DC as really representing the case for civic engagement and recognizing the complexities of teaching both about civic engagement in America and also civic engagement with Israel, and trying to promote a particular way of thinking in really complex and nuanced ways about how we love these countries, and we can also be in critical dialogue with them. So that's a walking between the raindrops that we do a lot of. And I think as a group of heavily women educators, we certainly bring that gender perspective. But I think within within the school, one of the things that I think a lot about, I came in, I'm the mom of 3, and we're a religious school, so that's part of our values, is to be oriented toward family and recognizing people as professionals and as having, holistic personal lives as well, and thinking about how do I as a female leader, for men and women within our organization, really share how transparently about how I'm balancing work and life, and as the leader, how do I do that? I really narrate it. So I tell everyone more than they want to know. I'm going to a soccer game. I'm going to a medical appointment. I'm going to be out because my daughter just got home from Israel and I haven't seen her in 3 months. And I am explicit about those choices that I'm making because I want to honor that other people, the men and women in our organization, should be making them. And what I'm seeing really beautifully, speaking to the same trend, is that men and women are making those choices, both to prioritize their families. And I got a few calls this year. I've been speaking a lot about empowerment, the empowerment approach, which I can talk more later if we have time, but how do we do these jobs in a sustainable way? And the only way to do these kind of CEO level jobs, I think, in a sustainable way is to empower your team. And so that we're sharing the load, we're sharing the workload and the mental load. That's the only way that we can do some of these really big jobs. But I've gotten calls from aspiring male heads of school around the country saying, can I do this in a way that's sustainable? That wasn't a conversation 10 or 15 years ago. It was mostly men coming into these roles and with very young children, much younger than mine, and just going for it. And I think we are entering a new generation of men also wanting to advocate for themselves and their families and considering that balance as they enter the role. So as that happens, I believe women will have a easier path to leadership because on the home front, we have men and women who are trying to recognize that balance and strike it together.
Thank you. And one more question to you to detailize. How many do you work with other independent schools with the same advocacy interest? So you have some association, and how it works, or every school do it in the direct way?
No, so we have several associations. We have something called the Association of Independent Schools of Greater Washington. And so Maryland, DC, and Virginia, we all work together, but I then work on an advocacy group within that for all DC heads, and we meet with the heads of local government to advocate on behalf of educators and education within the city. And I think those local government folks recognize that independent schools are a draw for people who are potentially considering coming to work in DC. Is there going to be the right school for their child? Will there be the right fit? My child has special needs and needs that kind of schooling. Do we have that here? Do we have a Jewish day school? Do we have the right all of these parochial schools so folks can get here? So we all do that work together. And then I am also part of an organization called Prisma, which is all the national umbrella organizations for Jewish day schools. And that used to be actually by denomination, and now it has become one singular organization. The donor said, we're not funding 4 of you, we'll do only 1, and so they brought us all together under one umbrella, and of course we're more powerful advocates in that way.
Very interesting, because sometimes people think that lobbying in business it's hard, and lobbying in for example, some issues which connect with advocacy, it's easy. I think sometimes it's more hard because it's too much stakeholders. I know that in general issues, maybe not with independent school, but with public schools, they have a board also.
And there's no money behind it, right? There's no money behind the lobbying and the advocacy. Yeah. It's just person power, but there's not money, and we don't have people who can be dedicated to that because they're with the students. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting. Now we'll move in. We will move into Galina. So my question and we will ask all questions after discussion if it's possible. Galina work a lot with PR issues, and so first of all, in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, people who work in campaign management, PR, also in law sometimes, they also do government relations work. So it's If in United States and in Canada it's pretty focused, so if you do lobbying, you do only lobbying. If you professional in advocacy, you do only advocacy. In our countries, sometimes you must have more wide range of responsibilities. So, we trying also to explore how related professions work. So Galina will explain how in question of many multi-stakeholders work, her work as public relations professional, work together with lobbyists of her company and her holding. So, but please represent a little bit how your energy company work, because maybe for international guests it's not so obvious. Thank you, Halina. So your time.
Maybe I start with how energetic system work in our country. There are generation, there are transportation, and there are distribution. I work in distribution company, and in my country mainly with communication with journalists, with media, with everybody, do distribution companies. That's why when Russia attacked my country and when Russia attacked energetic infrastructure, my duty was to explain to everybody, to people, that how it work, how Russia propaganda work, and because Russia want to convince our government, to convince maybe people who work in energy company, and that's why it was very difficult to explain this. And yes, it's in my country, my profession included not only communication with media, with journalists, but with leaders of opinions, with activities, because when it start, many people want to make strike, and that's why I must do different decision to stop this the strike, to stop this how to say bad opinion, погану думку про про те, що.
So you mean that Russia, so it was a lot of informational war, and as I understand, also many people deny to pay any money for electricity. And when 1 million people read news, and in news Russia put information campaign that, oh, it's war started, so not pay anything for electricity and other household fees. And you know what is the impact to company, because Galina represents huge company, and for government at all. So her function also was to fight with these messages in press. Yes, and how you do that? Explain to us, please.
Many different. I live in Lviv, this city near Poland. Yes, and many foreign journalists come to Lviv, and we together make some information message, not just in Ukrainian, but I can tell you from Singapore, from Japanese, from Poland, and that's why it was my main goal to do this good message for not just for Ukrainian but for other countries, and I really work 24/7 with our leader of with our activity, with our
influencers, opinion leaders, activists, volunteers.
Yes, with media, with journalists, and we together make this message to the people. Yes, and it was my main work.
It's very interesting because otherwise you can negotiate about special condition, because mostly energy companies in Ukraine, they negotiate about special condition, for example, that some period people can not to pay your credits or credits to government. So it was very successful lobbying work in the start, but it's not work without PR part, as Galina explained. And it's very interesting because even in Lviv, it's Western Ukraine, where Russian propaganda not so clear as in Eastern Ukraine or in Southern Ukraine, it still was very challenging, as she explained. I want to compare your experience also with Dr. Lada's experience, who worked with military issues, and then we will discuss a little more about advocacy of women's rights. So, Lada, you also listen our discussion. So we're trying to compare, advocacy experience, related experience, and related professional experience and classical business experience. So now many people even here ask. We American company who want to sell something to Ukraine. Maybe they want to sell something in defense industry, defense sector. So how it looks like originally in government relations work? Maybe you can explain to us, and also please represent your experience in this sector and maybe some related work which you do, like think tank work, I know, and so on and so forth. So please, Dr. Lada, your time.
Thank you very much for putting me into the women panel to make me get to bed earlier. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the invitation to speak to this lovely audience that I can see most of. I'm Lada Roslitsky. I'm a Canadian American of Ukrainian descent, and I founded a really manly business focused on defense and security consulting in Ukraine, with the vision that Ukraine will become a keystone of global security. And we focus on mainly developing defense cooperation with Ukraine and its allies, as well as focusing on strategic communications, information operations, and analyzing information warfare. So I had a wonderful panel before. Of course, Stephen Blank is always wonderful to listen to. And I just want to start by saying, in the previous panel, I don't know the gentleman who said it, but he said we should be in it as long as it takes. And my question is, how many Ukrainian men and women do you think we have to wait until we see true leadership from not only the United States, but other governments? I don't see leadership. I'm sorry, I was asked to talk about what type of leadership I see taking place. I see a lack of leadership, and I see a lack of responsibility to prevent genocide. And I live in Kiev, and we just had Tupolev bombers flying over. The alert didn't happen, but we're all very tired. So leadership is something that we really need, and I can turn to, as I was asked, to discuss how Ukraine has taken leadership, if that is what we could call it, in this time of war in the defense industry. Before I talk about leadership, I must say that the Ukraine Defense Order, which is legislation of how you order weapons, the legislation that was passed in 2020 has still not been imposed. The bylaws, the regulations are lacking. So we have a problem with real juridical leadership on the side of Ukraine's state defense order, as we have a lack of leadership on the American side when it pertains to the Lend-Lease program. And we all understand that Lend-Lease is complicated, but leadership, the lack thereof, is causing the deaths of, I think, people like cats and dogs more than children and men and women and old people. So let's talk about how Ukraine on an international level has taken leadership, and I'll try to make it fast because I think I have like 5 minutes. and I use two of them up. Ramstein. Ramstein is a wonderful initiative that has been created with the support together with Ukraine and the United States. We have over 50 countries supporting the defense industry and cooperation. The strategic communication of the Ramstein group is extremely low, and it is actually lowering the level of will to support Ukraine in its civilizational war. And in civilizational war, I mean, Ukraine is fighting right now not only against the genocidal Russian Black Matter Empire, we're fighting for American civil political rights. I see a lack of leadership when we examine the media landscape of the United States. I'm an American Canadian citizen, and when I visit America and I see the damage that is being created and the lack of real good checks and balances and accountability of what is being said and who is funding the speakers is very disturbing. So Ukraine in this aspect is a leader, and we have numerous private organizations, companies, LLCs, but also NGOs that can actually show that this informational warfare is not the freedom of expression. It is an attack on national security systems. So here Ukraine is a leader. And I'm very happy to discuss anybody who would like to talk about any of my topics. Please reach out to Katerina and she will put you in touch with us. So EUCOM has been doing a good job helping support the development of international trade, military trade industry, the development thereof. Exporting and the development of weapons in Ukraine. As we all know, Ukraine, am I frozen? Can you hear me?
No, we hear you well here.
As we all know, the state-owned enterprise Ukroboronprom had been created as a vertical that was responsible and under the command and control of the Kremlin. Currently, what we see with Ukroboronprom happening, and this is also leadership, but we definitely need to have conditionality, transparency, oversight, and control. They are now developing weapons for Ukraine outside of Ukraine in relationship with the Czech Republic. For instance, there are more countries, I think there are more than 7 of them. Leadership in the defense industry, which is, I wouldn't call it business, but for the first time in history, we see non-governmental organizations and foundations, like such as Povernish Kretula group, gathering money, and the Povernish has actually been licensed to import dual-use equipment and military equipment into Ukraine. But there's no business here. These are people who are doing fundraising and getting money from civilians or businesses. And based on that donation, they have been able to make arrangements with companies such as Lockheed Martin in order to buy instruments that Ukraine needs. So that is leadership, but it's not really a political leadership. It is a quasi political, societal, and private industry innovation. So this is very new. Next, Brave One is a program that the president of Ukraine, am I talking too long?
1 minute, please. Yes, and we'll move forward. Yeah.
Brave One is an initiative started by the Office of the President. We all know that there are some very serious questions about what that administration and the Office of the President is doing, particularly as it pertains to the state defense order. United 24 has gathered already over $345 million to fund Ukraine's military, to fund Ukraine's humanitarian demining, medical. We have a great need of combat medic training, totally unpaid for. So this is groundbreaking that we have a government actually gathering so much money. Brave One is something that my company actually registered to do with the American Embassy in 2021, before the big war started. Is what we need to do is develop really, really good ties between Ukraine's private military industry and American military industry. The technology that is being developed in Ukraine is outstanding. And we wanted to, and we are, actually, it's one of the things that we do, is developing the ties and contacts between Ukrainian allied private companies with the private companies of Ukraine. So I know I'm talking too long. I will cut myself short. I'm sorry if I was.
Thank you, Lada. I think we can do direct seminar about that. Because we will plan also series of seminars about different type of lobbying to autumn, so we can speak forward. Thank you for your leadership in this sector, and it's also interesting that leader of private defense production association in Ukraine, it's also a woman, Yulia Vysotska. So,
thank you so much.
Yeah, in this sector, thank you for your work. And we're moving to one more speaker. It's Julia. Julia also do classical advocacy work, and they push in Ukraine package of bills which was connect with a new system of payment of child support, and also of criminalizing domestic violence. It was quite hard because it connects with adaptation international laws, with ratifications, and also with big advocacy campaign. So it's classical example of advocacy campaign on women's rights. So Yulia, please be short if possible, because we must move in also to George Washington presentation, and we will add some special guests to our panel. So after your speech, I will do some brief questions to every speaker to do conclusion to our discussion. So please.
Thank you very much for question. For first, I want to start from government system in Ukraine, because in 2021 I and you have election to Parliament Ukraine, and we know how it was hard for women, and for it I can give you a small example of. In the first Parliament of Ukraine, we have only 2% women in all Parliament, and now in this Parliament we have only 20%. This result, very active women spent 30 years for 20%. That you must understand that we need help West support women program, and I hope that USA be very strong with us on this topic. And what we have about domestic violence and security for children. We had biggest problem during COVID with domestic violence, and a lot of women come to us with this really big problem, and we start to organize parliament groups for this topic, and create a new law. And I'm very happy that during 1 year, women was so active that we have this law, and children also have more finance help as aliments from men in our country. But I'm very worried about children which now kidnaps Russian, and we need to help international law. We must be more active with communication with international organization and different governments. And today you have a very international question: who better in a diplomatic way, woman or man, and which skills help in this situation? For me now, it's not question; it's responsibility, because our men now must fight for our land, and only women can have possibility to go out, go to different countries, and talk very strong about this topic. And I think our Ukrainian women, ready for it, and we try to do everything that possible and impossible that world listen us. And I want to tell that women now have a different front. It's a humanitarian front. It's evacuation children. It's medical support for our soldiers. It's education for children, because government cannot move in this topic very strong. And this, unfortunately, today we have also ecological catastrophe. And I really hope that world listen us, and in future we start to stop it before that it happens. And also humanitarian help. We evacuate more than 10,000 children during this war, and it's my case that, for example, a group for England to London was so difficult because it was children in hot region, and it was children who lose parents, who have not biological parents with us. And it was biggest problem, for example, because we understood that in UK law have not this kind of visa for children with not biologic parents, and we must change law during 1 month. I have very strong meeting in Parliament UK, in House of Lords, and thank you UK government, thank you Minister of Refugees, Lord Harrington, that we have this result, and this group start to UK, and now this group in safe place. I think that women now help our soldiers keep national, save national, our nation, and I'm very proud that our women start to be more international and make this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So as you can see also in that case, I remember that case about child support, mostly people who taken part in this advocacy work, they wasn't lawyers, they wasn't lobbyists, they was mostly women who was victims, and activists like Yulia. So it's also interesting that in advocacy work sometimes powerful of people who believe in something do tremendous good push, because before this laws was in Parliament I think 5 years and nobody care about them. When it's some bill which go to Parliament and never vote. So and this was very hard work, because on focus groups, on research, some men not support these bills. About criminalization of domestic violence. So it also was interesting how political managers help to fight these issues on focus groups, which they do on elections, and help this civil movement to push it to parliament. So it was really interesting case. I think you can share also more experience on our coffee break.
I only want to tell also that biggest problem for Ukraine already rehabilitation, mental health, sociality, and rebuild physical rehabilitation, people who have amputees, who have a problem and lose family and parents. And women now find big groups and start to rebuild psychological trauma for.
Yes. And
Thank
it's
you.
new packages in our country. It's money go through packages for some services to hospitals. So now they advocate these new packages with new money for this point. Okay, I have a specific question to you to finalize this discussion. It's shortly explain what the case was the most successful case in your lobbying or advocacy work in your life. and why it was successful. So because of he was passionate about that, because it was many people who join, because it's not interesting to discuss Bill HR 1018. It's important to discuss STEM, which in Bill HR 1018. So what the case was most successful for you? And it's not successful that it's passed, yes, that it's passed Senate, that it's passed House, and which was successful for you personally. Maybe it's your first case. So, Sarah, do you remember this most successful case in your life? I know that all your cases is successful, so but maybe some extremely successful.
We don't win them all, unfortunately. There's so many. It's nice to have the ability to say so many successes. I'll take the first one in my career. It was many years ago. A coalition of business industry lobbyists rallied around a rule that came out of the Department of Labor, specifically OSHA, which is Safety and Health Policy, and it was the ergonomics regulation. And so we went to Congress to use a new law that was passed. It had never been used before, that essentially if the Congress voted in support of the law, it could strike away the regulation as if it had never been written by the agency. And so we had done that, and I was part of a very intelligent group of men and women who are all very united and very driven on one singular goal, which is to make sure that this regulation, which would have been very onerous on every sector across our economy, was not able to go into effect. And just incredibly proud of that. And since then, now this law has been able to be successfully used many other times, but we were the first. So.
Thank you so much. Yulia, what about you? What case was most successful? At least short.
For me, for my heart, it was a case with children, but also I'm very proud that we can make a law for pregnant women that he have more finance support.
Thank you.
Mine was probably with DC, getting students and faculty to be able to return much more quickly after COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of staying home for 2 weeks, we were able to reduce it to 5 days, returning with a mask, and we won back weeks of education for our kids and teaching for the teachers.
Thank you. Alina, what about you in your practice?
This winter we had blackout and we lived during the blackout, and it was really maybe not very successful case, but really very difficult case.
Anti-crisis, yes.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
if you want to know about really anti-crisis, you can ask Halina about that. Thank you so much to our panelists. So, thank you so much. And we are today very flexible. I know that James Davis has a flight today, so he asked 10 minutes. He tremendous good in his work, so he asked 10 minutes to do his solo report about issue and about his practices, and then we will move into our reception to presentation of George Washington University. If you can wait for reception 10 minutes, I think we must take this practice from him, because it's really present to us to know about his practice, and because he can stay for the next panel. Is it okay? We're democracy, so is it okay? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. So floor is yours, and yeah, you skip a lot of additional statistics from the next panel, so you can just describe your work and your practices.
I'm really sorry about the scheduling snafu, but as you guys know, in this space, sometimes we have to move a little quicker than normal, and our schedules shift a bit, and so I've got to deal with a little client crisis this evening. I was actually prepared, a little bit more prepared to talk about government affairs and the trends and where I see things going. I am a public affairs practitioner. Founded Touchdown Strategies. We do tons of public affairs campaigns, both nationally, as well as internationally and also on the state level. A couple of the trends that I saw from the charts that they had, which I will still address because that's what I prepared for, was that healthcare is the leading area for investment in terms of government affairs, and that's even split out into healthcare as pharmaceuticals and then healthcare as services, which I think is interesting because you put that together and it really dwarfs everything else overall. This is for a variety of reasons. One is that healthcare affects us all, but more so, I think that there's just a tremendous amount of advancement in the field of healthcare, in the bio and life sciences sector. One of the clients that we worked through over the last year, which will give you a sense of some global stuff, is the merger between GRAIL and Illumina. GRAIL is a multi-cancer early detection. They take a little sample of your blood, they spin it around, and they figure out, hey, you have these kinds of cancers. Before that, you had to know, hey, I have lung cancer, I might have lung cancer, so I'm going to get tested for that individual, right? And there were only 5 different cancer tests on the market, but there are more than 50 different kinds of known cancers out there. So you couldn't even get tested for a lot of these things. And now you can do it in one vial of blood. Amazing technology, right? They were previously owned by Illumina, which is a big major healthcare giant, and they had said, hey, you know what, go perfect your technology. We're going to spin you off, go perfect your technology and come back to us when you grow up. They perfected their technology. They wanted to do a merger, and this is not your typical horizontal mergers that Washington and the EU have gone against. This is a vertical merger. So they're not buying up a competitor here. They're actually integrating their business chain. And Washington, this was the first of this new FTC's posture, that said, hey, you know what, we're going to block it, right? So just daily business activities, and they couldn't prove a real harm to consumers. Ultimately, they tried to push it off to the EU and not take action on it themselves, and the EU blocked it. And so you can see how this international coordination between these regulatory bodies was taking place and shaping force. What we did in that, and what a lot of companies are having to do these days, is they don't have the political capital to handle everything that they want. So they needed to get interest groups, they need to get coalitions, they need to get surrogates, and people that have some ability and influence over lawmakers to really interject themselves. And so you're seeing more and more of that, I believe, as a supplement to government affairs efforts overall, and that under the DOME strategy that many of you guys are so good at and working with the lawmakers directly. One other observation that I would kind of note here, and I will say that GRAIL ultimately won their case, and Illumina won their case and went to court, and so they have now effectively merged. One other kind of trend that I would look at is there is a case going before the Supreme Court right now, and it's one that I've been working on since the very beginning. It has to do with a little fisherman, a herring fisherman up in New Jersey. In 1984, there was a court case, and this has been the law of the land since then, called Chevron deference. I'm sure many of you guys have followed this. But ultimately, it said, hey, if Congress doesn't actually write the law and it's not explicit, they can send it over to the agencies, and this regulatory body now has the ability to come out and say, this is our interpretation of the law. And it's created this real creep. And so Congress has abdicated their responsibilities to actually write the laws to mean the things that are ultimately getting implemented, and the agencies have creeped in and become the lawmakers themselves. And so many budgets over the course have really focused on this regulatory lobbying practice. But if this is overturned, which I'm hopeful it will, especially with the makeup of the court, I think you're going to see a reallocation of dollars moving away from that regulatory side, and then you're going to have to do more public affairs campaigns and create this broader awareness of the issues. And so I'd keep your eye on that because I think it'll ultimately, if it takes shape, it'll impact everyone's business in the corporate regulatory lobbying space. So I know that's a lot, and I was planning on to have a little bit more discussion, but if we have a minute or two, I'm happy to take a question or two before I have to run out. Hopefully that is somewhat helpful information.
So how does answer this company you talked about compared to Elizabeth Holmes? Are those, I mean, because she came out.
So that's another big part. That's another big part of the biospace, right? Is that they have fraudsters in there just like everyone else, and so you have real tangible companies who have proven their own worth through the FDA and through other regulatory bodies. But then you have people like the Theranos stuff that muddies the water and actually causes a lot of misinformation for lawmakers. So it's an extra due diligence that you have to do in order to educate them on those things as well. You're going to see that a lot, I believe, in frontier technologies, especially in the space of AI, and you're already seeing it with ChatGPT as well, because you got members of Congress having to regulate things that they don't actually understand themselves, and so that's going to be a significant hurdle, I believe.
The case that you're working on that's before the Supreme Court, do you see it setting a precedent in certain aspects, and do you think like the justices are going to go forward or against it?
I am hopeful they'll go forward to overturn Chevron deference, and that it will ultimately push back the responsibility of law writing, lawmaking, to the Congress itself. And so I think if this happens, you're going to see a lot of new cases come up, a lot of new opportunities in the government affairs space, where now legislation is going to have to be written because they've been assuming so much with the regulatory bodies, and that's pervasive. I do believe, I'm hopeful and believe that this will ultimately overturn, but it will impact almost every industry, because almost every industry has to deal with regulators.
I got a quick one. So you mentioned about AI. So how will AI help with the GR and GA business?
That's an interesting concept. And what I tell people is, at least on my own team, you have kind of a Luddite perspective, which is AI is going to take us over and kill us, I think that those fears are a little bit stoked too much. I think there is a real concern about having moral AI and responsible AI and using it. But ultimately, how are you going to use it to increase the speed of your activities? But it can't replace a human brain. It's not going to replace what you know from your conversation with a lawmaker. It's not going to create something new, a new idea, a new strategy for you. It can give you some blocking and tackling, and it can proofread your reports a little bit closer. It may be able to help you spit out some different content. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go in and fill in the details, because you know what the audiences that you have to reach, what messages are going to be most compelling to them. And AI isn't there and won't be there for a long time. So you can leverage and harness those tools to make yourself more efficient in your daily operation. Oh, anyone from Zoom land? Okay, it looks like Mike Alio. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and I don't know how to unmute you, but you have your hand up. Oh, he's had his hand up for the whole time. Okay.
No, Mikhailo, if you have questions.
Look, I don't see any.
AI is not working.
No, this is just standard tech that doesn't work. It's kind of.
We had that AI.
It could. All right.
If somebody have questions from Zoom, also please feel free to write these questions or to just ask questions. But please do that in the next 2 minutes.
Was it Leaf that made the Kardashian joke earlier? Yeah, so funny enough, I actually was with the Kardashians last week because I do a lot of, I've worked on a lot of different programs, and we're actually putting together an event where they were coming to speak at it. So we got a lot of tie-ins here. You mentioned Rumsfeld and working it earlier, and that was my first job. I cut my teeth doing crisis communications in the Pentagon, and I think many of those same lessons around selling the surge in Iraq are actually consistent with, kind of the best practices that I would say are a staple for public affairs. And now, obviously, we can all look back and see what happened and kind of the occupation period and discuss that. But it was a tremendous opportunity there to work on that and to learn at that level.
Can you also give advice to? I'm sorry. Can you also give advice to professionals worldwide about what they need to read, to teach, maybe some lectures, to go to profession and to create industry in their countries? Because in some countries they literally create new industry of government relations in their own countries. And then Mikhail, question.
I'm trying to think of good books in that space, and quite frankly, I'm drawing a blank right now. I think what I've always done is, if you have a problem, there's so many sources of information out there. If you Google it or you put it into ChatGPT, you might find a source that can read you in further. I think it's ultimately in just being creative. There's a lack of creativity that I think we oftentimes as practitioners bring to the table. Not every problem has the same solution. There might have some basic tenets of the same thing, but they're different because we live in a complex world that has complex answers to it. It's not always so simple. In terms of other conferences, I mean, obviously, I think the Chamber of Commerce throws some interesting stuff from time to time. There's some energy stuff out there, and talking about the energy conferences. I would look at kind of the model that a lot of philanthropists are building. Charles Koch has built a big kind of network of organizations where he has a grassroots presence, he has a lobbying team, he has a media a component, they have a policy shop, they have think tanks that they work with across the country, and that's not the only one. I mean, there's that on the left, and there's other versions of it on the right. I think really kind of learning and looking at what those folks are doing to advance public policy more from philanthropic perspective could actually bring a lot of lessons into what we're doing as government affairs and working with corporate America.
Yes, please.
Yeah, coming back to the AI topic and basically the technologies that we as humanity right now possess, in your opinion, will it help us to actually bring in more social responsibility to the table? Because, look at the society in general right now, there are still a lot of people that are passive, right? They shift the responsibility onto politicians, onto socially active people, and basically do not take part actively in the society affairs in general. So will it help us to actually bring in this social responsibility to the table on the global scale?
I think where I would put the social responsibility aspect is you want to find the nexus between what's good for society and what's good for your business, and really focusing there, because like Tom's shoes, which everyone can look at, like they give a pair of shoes away when you buy a pair of shoes, right? To some person who can't afford it, and that's a great marketing ploy, and also fits the passion of their company. Fine, go do it, right? That's great, and I think they've made themselves very successful at doing that. If you're a former client of mine, I used to work for BP. I did BP during the oil spill, right? If you and that, which was an international public affairs challenge, to say the least, but if you have marketing campaigns that don't actually reflect what you're doing in your business, you put yourself in extreme vulnerability. And I think a lot of companies are more in that space. And so, they were beyond petroleum, but then when there's something blows up in the Gulf, and then all you see is petroleum, that actually hurts you even worse overall. And so I think it's more about just kind of being finding the sweet spot between what the nexus of your business is. Like, it might be good to donate money to a fire department, but if you have nothing to do in that space, then that's probably not a leveraged opportunity for your business on social responsibility. They didn't have a lot of leveraged opportunities at that point. They were doing a lot of fire department stuff versus working with environmentalists or working with folks in the innovation space on the energy side.
No, there's a guy
Sorry.
who's trying to talk. I think.
Okay, sorry. I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Wells. Yeah, thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah?
Yes. Go ahead.
Excuse me, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, my name is Mikhailo Hassan. I'm from Odessa, Ukraine. First of all, my warmest greetings to all of you and to Miss Katerina Darchenko, who really does a great job by organizing such events. And she did the same great job back when she was in Ukraine, because she actually, I don't know if she told you or not, but probably she told you that she was the one who pioneered and championed the idea of building a trustworthy relationship between civil society of Ukraine and Ukrainian government. So this is a very important job. So Catherine, thank you very much for what you're doing. So my remark and actually question would be about political leadership, because actually, unfortunately, I haven't joined from the beginning of this event, but what I really find actually quite tricky is when we talk about political leadership and the lack of political leadership. I think that we have to quote Bismarck, who once said that politics actually is the art of possible. So we have to pose the question: do we really can ask political leaders from even Western states to do more than they can in order to support Ukraine? Because personally, as a Ukrainian citizen, I would like to see more support from you or from Western leaders. But as a political analyst, I actually question this possibility, because we have to remember that each political leader bears responsibility for his society, and actually society, his voters has to decide what kind of political leader actually he is. So this is quite subjective, statement about political leadership. And the second thing that we also have to think about media leadership, which is actually also very important, because now, unfortunately, I think that media, TV hosts, journalists, they're really lacking their leadership roles. So I would like to ask our distinguished speaker about this. So what do you think about the role of media, the standards of media, especially in the light of the Russian full-scale invasion into Ukraine? How can you assess this media leadership? Thank you.
Okay, so media, I'll take that one first, and then we'll go to political, because that one is we could sit here all night and talk about both of these, but I think less is probably going to be said on the media side. The media side is something that I've studied quite a bit. I'm actually looking at launching a new media company, which is a whole other thing, which we'll have to talk about a different time. But the reality is today's media is written exclusively for the audience before it actually gets synthesized, right? I know who I'm writing for, and therefore then I present to that audience, and the audience knows what they're looking for, and therefore they buy into what I'm doing. And it's this virtuous cycle where you kind of get a polarization of ideas, and you have MSNBC on one extreme, and you have kind of the right of center, although I do believe there's a little less right of center perspectives in the media landscape overall, but you have a right of center perspective on the other extreme, and they're just kind of talking to their audiences and talking past the American people on many, many things. And so, unfortunately, that is where the media landscape is, and that's a lot has to do with the monetization of media, the clicks, the viewership, all of those things. Because if I tell you something that kind of goes against what you're predisposed to, then all of a sudden you turn me off, and now I don't have any revenue coming in the door. And so I know that there are a lot of folks out there looking at this and trying to figure out, okay, what are the fixes for this? There's also been a move more toward opinion and entertainment media than true, straight journalism. Like Peter would have known, in his days working in the White House for Reagan. You might have seen a little bit more even-handed perspective from media even back then. Peter saying no, but as someone who's watched it evolve, I can't imagine it was this bad. So, so I do believe that there is a leadership fracture in the media. I don't know what the immediate answer is, but there is a big swath of Americans who I think want something different, but they don't know how to elect into something different from a consumption standpoint. So that's about all I can give you there in my insight. The second part is on the political leadership. I think that's absolutely the case, and there's a rise of populist nationalism across the globe that you can see, and I think that ultimately hurts a lot of global commerce. I would love to see a bit more, especially working with our allies across the country, to shore up supply chains, which has been a big issue and folks are concerned about, so that we're not completely dependent on China to produce all of our technology, particularly when all of the other countries are really developing the technology, and then China's using that technology, and we've outsourced it. We've had a lot of corporate folks who, for various reasons, have outsourced a lot of that to China. So I think that's an area where I'm hoping we can see more political leadership. And I hate to do this, but I need to get to my to my other event. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you everyone for having us here. My name is Ben, and I'm one of the recruiters with the Graduate School of Political Management at the George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. I met Katerina a couple of months ago, and while she is actually not affiliated directly with the university, she knows a lot of our students, current students, alumni, and is already very involved and engaged in the kind of work that we talk about and teach here at the Graduate School of Political Management. So when I was invited to this, I thought this was a great partnership to come and just talk about some of the programs to a bunch of political, government relations, government affairs professionals, to see how our programs may be a part of helping you further your journeys and your careers in this profession that we all love and care about. So let me start off by just explaining a little bit about who we are. The Graduate School of Political Management is the first and foremost school of applied politics, different than a degree in public policy or political science that focuses on the data and theories behind why politics works the way that it does. The GSPM is focused on teaching you the strategies and tactics to succeed in the role of electoral campaigns, advocacy initiatives, legislative campaigns, and then even if you have ambitions for running for office yourself, you can take classes in campaign strategy, even take a class in running and serving in the U.S. Congress taught by a former member of the House of Representatives. So that's a little bit about who we are. I wanted to mention a little bit about the structure of how our programs work, because it is in the College of Professional Studies. We understand adult professionals who are already in their career, but maybe want to go back to school to get a little bit of an additional certification, maybe get a promotion in their job. So we offer 4 10-week terms throughout the year. There is fall, Spring 1, Spring 2, which actually just ended this past weekend for our students, and then there's summer. This actually lets you complete a greater number of courses over the course of a full year, since there's 4 terms instead of 3. And most of our students take 2 classes per term while working full-time. At that rate, they can actually finish their degree in about 18 months. This degree is highly focused on the networking components. We want you to be working while you're in the program. We think that graduate school is really the start of your career, so the more that you can develop networking habits and building that network while you're in your graduate school program, the better off you'll be once you graduate and are out looking for jobs. So let me just talk a little bit about the Political Management Master's Program, which is the program that I focus on and recruit for. Then I'll turn it over to my colleague Shakiba to talk about the Legislative Affairs and Strategic Public Relations programs, respectively. If you have any questions about this, I also wanted to mention there are flyers on all of the tables about each of these master's programs if you want to find out a little bit more. Also, the donkeys and the elephants are complimentary. There are more out on the table out there. Please feel free to take one, take both. We are very bipartisan here at the Graduate School of Political Management. We want you to learn from all perspectives and learn the best practices, really, of how to do politics. So political management is really for students interested in studying the art of electoral campaigns, advocacy initiatives, and political communications more broadly. You know, when you're working in politics, when you get someone elected to office, you don't stop campaigning. Your campaign switches focus. Now you start focusing on what are your legislative priorities? What things are you going to try to get passed through the legislature? Who are the other elected officials that you need to target to build relationships? Who are the champions around this cause or this initiative that you need to get on your side to get enough public attention and public support to win your campaign? These are the kinds of dynamics that we talk about in the Graduate School of Political Management. And even if you don't want to work in campaigns or advocacy forever, the structure of what we teach is transferable to a lot of different aspects of politics. If you want to go work in campaigns for a few years and then switch to lobbying, if your boss gets elected and you want to go work in their administration, you have a lot of different options available to you when starting a political career based on the connections that are available to you at the Graduate School of Political Management. 2 other things I wanted to mention about political management before I turn it over. We have a global politics concentration in the Political Management Master's Program, which is very relevant to what they talk about here in this organization and at the International Leadership Forum. It takes a lot of the concepts of the strategies that we use in the national model, but they apply it to the international model of how you work as a diplomat, how you work to create solutions with other countries based on their geopolitical history and the problems that they're facing. But we also offer something in the global politics concentration called the Global Perspective Residency course. This is essentially the graduate school equivalent of a study abroad program. You spend a few weeks in the classroom studying the country that you'll be traveling to, the different political structure, and then you take a 1-week trip to that country where you get to tour the embassy, meet different public officials, and see how politics is done in a different part of the world. Right now, actually this week, our students are in the Republic of Georgia. They just started their week in their residency. So it's just on the other side of the Black Sea from the Balkans, but it's in a similar part of the world to some of what we've been talking about tonight. So I think it's an incredibly unique program. If you know anyone in your network who might be considering going back to school or getting an additional certification, please tell them about the Graduate School of Political Management. Take a flyer from us out there on your way out. But now I'll turn it over to Shakiba to talk about the Legislative Affairs and Strategic Public Relations Master's programs.
Thank you, Ben. Hi everyone, my name is Shakiba Shahir. I am also one of the recruiters with the Graduate School of Political Management at GW. We have a full master's program in legislative affairs that focuses on applied politics, advocacy, and also lobbying. If you're interested to learn in a city that shapes the world directly from people who are shaping it, please come to GW at the Graduate School of Political Management, and you will learn from our adjunct professors and professors who are actually working in these fields in Congress, Hall of State, and Capitol Hill. We also have another full master's program in strategic communication that focuses on public relations, public affairs, and then communication. This is also a great program that focuses on communication, and also it's a very short program, as little as 12 months to be graduated. We also have GSPM also offers 6 graduate certificates, and they are designed for working professionals who are not interested in a full master's degree but wants to get a promotion in their job and wants to get into a program that they can graduate as little as in 2 terms. These graduate certificates are 12 to 18 credits that you can earn, and the programs that they are focused, these certificate programs, we have a graduate certificate in community advocacy, digital politics, digital communication, global public relation, Tax and Political Management, and also we have a graduate certificate in public relation. If you need to dive deep into each program or each certificate program, feel free to reach out to us, the in-person audience. You can get our business cards on the table outside, and for online audience, you can visit our website, and we will be there. Our information is in our website, GSPM Graduate School of Political Management, and we will be glad to help you and assist you with providing more information. Thank you. Back
Thank
to
you.
you.
And from me, I really have this conversation with Ben because I think it's one of the programs for Ukrainians. It was like 10 years ago, and even now, no, this person don't work in JW University, but it's very interesting that even this strategy thinking which they promote, it's really very important because you can teach digital, you can do some field work on election, because in our country field work very important. But strategy thinking, they really masters in that, and to promote it even to new markets like Eastern Europe, Central Asia, so it's very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I definitely agree that field work is really important in terms of political organizing. But we want you to be the one graduating with a degree in political management and then putting together the strategy, leading your teams, not the one answering the phones or knocking on the doors all the time. While that's really important and it helps you learn how to do politics, we want you to be the one making the decisions in the rooms where it matters.
And when you have 30 million voters, it's really important to have good strategy, because otherwise you use $50 million to advertising which not work, and so on and so forth. So sometimes in our countries it's happened. Yeah, but it's other discussion. Thank you so much for your work, and we will share your information with our community. So we have 2 more interesting presentations. Let's say thank you to our guests. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just for those of you that, when a member of Congress is, oh, do you want me to come up? They're just, that's kind of the role they play. So she's dying to come up here and help us out today.
Not for like talking,
but it's very important that
since he worked with my favorite political consultant that I like a lot, and he told me that he was telling all these good things about me, so I better keep it up.
If anybody was here thinking they could get the Congresswoman's business, my good friend is her consultant, so back off.
Good job.
I'd like to start first with, we also have a few people online, and pardon if I mispronounce your name, Noria, are you there with us? Nora? Yeah. If you'd like to introduce yourself real quick, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sorry, repeat that?
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yes. So hi everyone, good evening. My name is Nora Ali. I do brand development and marketing and strategies, but I also focus heavy on Africa, particularly when it comes to investment relations and government relations. I'm based in DC, but I'm also based in East Africa, Kenya.
And also online joining us tonight is, again, pardon my mispronunciation, is it Mila? Mil? Sigar?
Michael Sigler.
Sigler. Miguel Sigler? If you tell us a little bit about who you are, I think you're muted, right? There you go.
I could say good evening to you guys, good afternoon, but to me, I would say late night. Okay. Hello from Slovenia. I'm also, how to say, public affairs consultant, or you would name it, how to say, governmental affairs, or the word, which is a nasty one, which we like, lobbying. So I'm a lobbyist, registered one. I reside in Slovenia. I do have my international company, which is called MC Public Affairs, and I do the job across the United States. And also I'm present in Brussels, and I'm present also in Luxembourg. But we deal, how to say, cross-border lobbying as well. So it means on the level of the EU, it means EU institutions, that means Council of Europe, Parliament, European Commission, and then also in the national governments. And as well, you know, we were a bit involved as well as Slovenia just became a member of the Security Council, with a new permanent seat. So we were lobbying that as well. And we just had also the conference, international conference called Lobbying Regulations as well. I'm also the chairman of the Slovenian Association of Legal Lobbying, and later on I'll explain more.
Good, thank you very much. And now to our panel that's here in front. I'll defer first to our Congresswoman who is here with us, if she'd introduce herself.
Victoria Sparks, representing the great state of Indiana.
And then we also have Thaddeus, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Thaddeus Walls. I'm a political consultant originally from Chicago, now based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Glad to be here with you all.
And again, mispronunciation, is it?
Don't get tired.
Oh, let's try it. Okay, we'll give it a shot here. Ejike? Ejike. Add the E on it. Go ahead.
Hey, my name is Ejike Ebono. I was born and raised in Nigeria, but I live in Dallas. And I don't like to classify myself as a lobbyist, but I invest in relationships. So that, you know, I do private encounters with political people in order to get a message across. So I do that for clients domestically, and I do that for clients internationally.
And we're all here up on this panel to discuss leading industry standards in business lobbying. And I'd like to throw the first question to the Congresswoman. Well, I'm putting you on the side.
This must be in panel about women's leadership. But
Exactly.
Okay, we'll talk about lobbying.
Exactly. In leadership, there, when it comes to a lot of things have been said in this country regarding transparency and integrity and access in Ukraine as compared to the United States and in Western Europe. What is your position on leadership and also in lobbying for on those issues of is integrity, transparency, and access vital to a democratic system where people have access to their leadership?
Well, do I have supposed to talk on this or not?
Yeah, I think that one right there. Is it on?
Doesn't make
it's for Zoom because
we need to do that
for Zoom.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit since I understand the deliberation in the United States a little bit better, and I'll tell you there is definitely, important things in the legislature when you want to work on issues, right? You want to talk with people. There is no, sometimes lobbying has a bad rap, but it's nothing wrong with groups actually represent an interest in lobbying for interests of some organizations. And if they're good lobbyists, they could be very well informed on issues. They could provide you information from inside that you might not be able to get it otherwise. I think that is a responsibility of you as legislator to make sure that you remember who you represent. And you remember that I always joke, there is no lobby for the people here. So we are the only lobby for the people. So it's important to have a transparency where we as a representative have a mechanism where we actually do what the right thing for the people, and we can communicate with that. Like tomorrow I have hearings on, on some beef processing. So I met with all sides of that issue. I met today in my district, I met with farmers. I'm going to talk to monopolies, even though I don't like them, but I want to hear their case. So I think it's important to educate legislators also and have a transparency to make sure that legislators are not influenced, because, you get bad apples everywhere. So I think it's important not influenced by these decisions. So I think lobbies can be useful, but can be harmful if there is no transparency, lack of transparency, and if the system can be abused. And it's very important that people have this mechanism for that.
And I was going to toss this next one to Noura. Is she still with us there? But I guess not right now. I'll throw it to Mikhail. What's your position on those issues of transparency, integrity, and access in your business leadership dealings?
I think that this is one of the most important ones. I cannot even think of business without transparency, integrity, and and also without the ethics in this respect. And of course, I would think it has to be legal, especially now within the European Union, and due to the conference which we just had, and we had all the states in Slovenia. And there were, from the United States, Canada, Brazil, South Africa, and as well all the European countries. And there was also European Commission and OECD. And we have touched the base regarding as well about transparency. And as you know, the process itself, it has a transparency register. It means when you are lobbying and when you have the access to the European politicians or the members of the European Parliament, European Commission or so, you have to be as a legal entity and as an individual registered. And as well, you have to perform, you have to have declare the budget. It's almost the same as in the United States. The only thing it is that what we have discussed also the Foreign Agency Act, because Brussels didn't have it, and now with the Ukraine-Russian war, we know that sometimes could be bypassed, and some of the weak democracies and some countries which they don't have, a strong legislation, that some country, if you don't check the background, maybe will go via and they will establish some company, I don't know, in Croatia, Bulgaria or so, but are actually Russian entities or from another side. So there will be much more strict regulations in the way, and the OECD, they just had also Integrity Week in Paris, and they will have the new regulations, the new recommendations after the 10 years of the, introduced recommendations to the legislations. We as Slovenia as part of that, EU as well, I think also in the United States and so all the others. So there is, for the transparency view, no exemptions. What does it mean? That everyone, in our countries who wish to deal access to the politicians should be in the register. And that means that, and the transparency is very important, and it means also that what will follow, it will follow also all the bureaucratic rules, and it means that we'll have more responsibility as well, and we will have to, put a lot of double checks with whom we are working, and that we are, according to the laws. And but there are also some of the new things. The lobbying world, they wish to, to change, and there were some participants at the OECD meeting which they say that should be RPE, which it means responsible political engagement. So I don't know now governmental affairs, public affairs, lobbyists, but responsible political engagement. So it means it does a lot actually. It does, it's linked towards the transparency and integrity and all the ethics. And you know that Europe had a big scandal about Qatarians and all the others trying to influence European Parliament, and there were some bribes going on. But, that's bad, right? That's what we all wish to prohibit.
Before I throw the question to one of our next panelists, if any of you have spent any time here in DC on Capitol Hill, you'll hear buzzers every so often associated with clocks and lights on the clocks and everything else, which is usually an indicator for the members of Congress that they have a vote and they have to be somewhere. And our Congresswoman who's joined us tonight is in the same position. She has a limited amount of time she can spend with us, and I wanted to just throw out to her, can you share with us on some of your thoughts on leadership? What are some of the key things in leadership that you would like to share with us tonight?
Well, just kind of follow up quickly on the other things. I think we also need to make sure that we have enough standards on elected officials. There is no conflict of interest. And sometimes, a lot of times, politicians like to pawn this issue and say, oh, we're going to register everyone else, but don't want to hold themselves accountable. I think it's important that you as a politician also transparent and you disclose what you are doing and if you, and what you are not doing. And I think it's important to have the transparency and you are not engaged in the conflict of interest. And sometimes, if we look, we have some federal or state laws, and sometimes we're actually not as good as we should be. But that's a different conversation. But we should hold ourselves also accountable, not just everyone else. As related to leadership, I'll be honest with you. Unfortunately, political system is not set up to do. Leadership, political system to, for some reasons, set up not to cause harm, especially in the United States. We have spread powers, so, spread around different states and make sure that no one can do harm. So it's very, very hard to get anything done in the system, and it's meant to be. But when you pawn the issue for too long, then it accumulates a lot of issues. And unfortunately, when you don't have leaders that have a backbone, because leading is taking tough political decisions because somebody's not going to like. If I sit here and blame the other side day and night, I'll get reelected. When I pick some battle, somebody's not going to like it. But ultimately, that's about some leaders willing to pick some battles at some crucial moments of time for the country and willing to say, this is important for the people, and I'm not going to worry about it. Who's going to attack me? Who is going to do what? I think it's the right thing to do, and I only care that it needs to be done for the people I represent. And that would take, guts. It take communications, it take relationship, and find some other people around you who'd be willing to go with you, because it's very difficult if you don't have a team. So that's why developing relationship and working with other people, and when you go in the war, that willing to go in the trenches with you because they know that you'll be with them. It's extremely, extremely important, like in any other, in business and politics. So attracting the leaders that are willing to do it is very difficult, and I think we as a country need to do a better job with that too. And we have young Republicans. I was just talking to them next door, and we need to raise our new generations of leaders that willing to get with knowledge and understanding, because political process is complicated. If you're from other countries and think it's not messy here and hard, you need to see money spent on what you're hearing on TV. It's enormously difficult. You have to survive. The strongest survive. It's enormous amount of money, and the intellect comes after you in opposition. You go into tough races and you have a machine coming from you. You have to be agile, fast, and have good people helping you and good teams, and building that relationship with team when you know that is extremely important. But I think as you know, it takes few percentage of people to get stuff done in any country. And I think it doesn't take 80%, 20% can do a lot or less. More major battles were won by very few. But I think people see you do the right thing and be authentic, people will go with you, and never be afraid to pick a righteous fight and righteous battle. And we have a lot of them happening right now. We actually don't have the votes for that reason tonight. So, and we can debate if it is righteous or not, but and that's one thing. I'll be honest with you. I had huge fights with the other side, Democrat Party, and I'm very far apart in a lot of issues. Very hard for me to find common ground, even if I was able to do it when it was very important for our national security. But I hold my party even more accountable than the other side, because this is the party that I'm part of. And I'm not this is the party that I can hold more accountable. I elect these people, I put pressure on these people. We are the team, so never be afraid to challenge your own side when your side is not doing the right thing. And I think that is the toughest I see for a lot of people in political process, because you have a machine coming at you, and then you will be worried that, that you will not be supported by that. But I think that is tests your strength and determination, and people will see that you're willing to do it, and if you not going to win the people, there are a lot of good things. You can drink champagne on the beach, there are a lot of things you can do. Politics is not the only thing, but you want to look back and say, I did what I could in the circumstances I was in, and I did the best what I could, and never regret that you didn't. You could have, you should have, and you didn't do something that was important. And that's something we need to raise our children doing that. And as a huge fan of the republic, and I know that there is a lot of, we don't have a pure democracy in the United States for a reason. Pure democracy usually leads to dictatorship. It's not Aristotle said, not me, and Plato. But I think we have republic for a reason, and I think it's important to educate politicians and political people that what is the meaning of republic, what do we have to fight, what do we hear, because America, in the United States, we protect people's rights to life, liberty, and property. We protect. This is that I test myself. It's a bill that I'm introducing. I have a huge debate this week. The bill I'm introducing is going to be protecting people's rights. And I'm going to stop, because I'm not here to come to a politician to listen to me. But I think it's important to raise people with a strong views and ability to, fight for the people. And I think a lot of times it's very tough, but we need to have more leaders like that. That is leadership, when you do something that is tough and you're tested in tough circumstances, because ultimately big decisions are very difficult.
And before, if you have to leave, I wanted to make sure I got this question in. Which university did you like the most? National Economic University or Indiana University in Purdue?
Listen, I'll tell you, I actually came from University of Life. Okay, this is the best.
That's
you
a
learn.
Politician answer.
No. Listen, this is the true. The true. I mean, education is. I always say, education is a good thing to get your foot in the door, maybe, and I came from fancy college, University of Economics, when I came to the United States, and no one cared about my fancy degree. I'm like, OMG, what I'm going to do? And my first job was a bank teller for $8 an hour, and I learned a lot about the country, and and learned about that I need to become, people were saying CPAs are smart. That's the whole reason I became CPA, because I could get another job. But in reality, in everything you do, if you learn, I had the tough races, and I'll be honest with you, and my party didn't support me too, okay? I fought my own party before I fought the other side, but the reason why people supported me, because I was in the trenches, and I learned two things from ground up. Any job, any profession, when you learn it from ground up, I knew how my signs are going to be the best. If the wind is not going to blow them up, because I put them for decades for other people. So I know how to create my signs quickly. I knew the people knew me, and I was able to organize much quicker. This relationship are very valuable, especially when you with people when you don't need them, and you just help them because you truly believe in the same cause. A lot of people were willing to work 24/7 for me because they believe in me, and that is something you cannot replace. You cannot pay people to go and in a huge fight and go and very really going to be attacked. People were threatened their businesses will get burned down if they support me. It was a tough races. You don't think that the stuff is here is tough. You can ask Tim. He knows the whole, because it was very tough race, but that people will go with you when they see that, and that's important, and that's your life skills, and you learn. So all of these degrees are good. I'm not against people doing degrees, but ultimately you learn from experience, and you become good only by doing something. So like when I need to do, I do some farming, but when I today need tomorrow to have a discussion about beef processing monopolies. I actually went to livestock producers this morning because I am not processing meat. I don't know how to do it, even though I do soybean farming. And I learned a lot of good things from them and the policy making. And anything you do, go to the people that do the work for decades. If you know how to, shoot javelins, you need to go talk to people that done it for years, okay? You go to the right people because only experience teaches you and you become the best, and not be afraid to pick some dirty jobs because, they teach you to be tough and they teach you the knowledge that you'll never learn anywhere else. So that's something. So University of Life is the best skills, and try to do the work, and whatever life throw you in, never be afraid to do it.
Good. I'd just like to thank the Congresswoman for taking the time to come and speak to us today. And if any of you are ever in Kokomo, Indiana, stop by her district office and say hello to her staff.
Yeah, I'm close to Indianapolis, and we have, Hamilton County, Indiana, #1 to raise family in the country, ranked by Forbes magazine, the one I represent. #1 in the country. So if any of you need to move, this is one of the blessed places for children. So thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me back.
So I'd like to throw back to Noura. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
I wanted to throw you the question that we had asked a couple of the other folks on our panel here. Leadership in and around the world. A couple things. How do you rank the need for transparency, integrity, and access to government officials?
So for me, as far as just within government relations, public affairs, lobbying arena, I would say transparency is very important, and also integrity. And I feel like everyone kind of highlighted that, but I think for me, as far as yes, there's been abuse of lobbying practices, right? And having certain groups influence for their special interests. But at the same time, as individuals who are in this arena, we have to be conscious. And I truly believe that if you're able to be consistent, if you're able to be transparent, if you're able to hold some key values that showcase your integrity, you're able to create, we don't need to have losers. We can create win-win solutions for everyone, for all parties involved. And when it comes to leadership within the arena, I think we need to be mindful of how we're presenting this, how we're also pushing different interests or different agendas that might be of interest of whoever we're supporting. Let it be different NGOs, let it be government or interest groups, or let it be corporate companies. And just with that, for me, is the narrative and the view that the world has of lobbying, it does leave a bad taste, right? But I think we're in a unique position right now to change that narrative. I've seen some good work be done. I've seen some great, bills and policies get passed by having the right people push for it, because there's that sense of passionate and purpose behind it. But at the same time, you have corporate companies that have certain things that, they're interested in, and they need that support to push it. So it's like having key, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, that's actually impactful. But at the same time, be consistent when it comes to being transparent, and also having these values and just norms that have that infuse integrity into it.
Thank you. I'll go back to our board that's panelists that are here. And TK, can you give us a few examples of cooperation in Africa between leaders and lobbyists, and whether the relationship they have there is effective in finding solutions to the problems that people face?
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Well, lobbying and leadership is a factor that is driven by where is the people? How mature are they in their own political environment? Every politics is local. So if the way lobbying in Africa, I don't want to say Africa is just 54 African countries, and they don't even get along amongst themselves. So if you talk at particular countries, for instance, I was born and raised in Nigeria. Do they have lobbyists? How are the lobbyists? Are they regulated, or are they doing it by relationship? So, the lobbying industry doesn't exist in most undeveloped countries because it's more like a relationship thing. If your uncle, your relation is the president or the senator, you just go in and talk to them about what you want to get done. But looking at that, how has Africa achieved a level of growth based on the situation and the things that they are facing? They still haven't been able to do it. So lobbying hasn't really helped. Leadership hasn't really helped, because I believe leadership has to be something that produces an outcome that benefits everybody. So if you're looking at those countries in Africa, which African country has emerged to a level that you said they are developing or they are developed, even though they are lobbying and then they are also relationship. So, and then you come to America. Of course, when you want to lobby, you have to register, you have to know who you're talking to, and all those information is disclosed. So transparency is very important. But in those countries, it's not transparent. Even in America now, we have issues where if it's government by the people, for the people, why do we have classified information? If we're actually talking about representing the people, so why are we hiding something from them? So there are a lot of challenges in this industry about leadership and lobbying, and what do we disclose and how do we disclose it? Because if we are really transparent, then your representative should tell you everything that is coming across their desk and how that is going to impact them.
Thaddeus, I'd like to throw out a kind of a similar question to you on, can you give us some experiences on how relationships between state and businesses in the United States, and in particular in an area you'd like to touch on, how those have been successful and what you think needs to lead to those cooperations being successful?
In my opinion, it's kind of like a catch-22, depending on what the stakeholders or opponents would deem as such. One thing I can think of is how it's 2023, so at the end of the Obama administration, how the Trans-Pacific Partnership, how that was going through Congress in terms of getting support for it, in terms of economic and quality of life outcomes. But then you saw like a lot of activists, labor unions, and corresponding groups push back on this bill, saying like, hey, this thing isn't going to lead to some of the things it says it's going to do. So really, success is this bill going to improve or change someone's life for the positive or the negative? And I feel like that's where the debate is, and unless your pockets or livelihood is affected, that really determines what's successful or potentially fails.
And I'll throw this out, and then we'll work around the table and the Zoom again. But keeping it with you, is it important when you start these conversations? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there was only about I think it was about 700 companies, or less than that, had offices here in Washington. Today, there's well over 3,000 companies that have offices in Washington. Is it important to start these dialogues before a crisis occurs or before a piece of legislation starts? Is that an aspect of leadership on the business level of being engaged before you really need to put out a fire or see a piece of legislation passed?
See, now that's too much logic and makes too much sense. Proper preparation prevents poor performance, but unfortunately, we govern by crisis. We make decisions in calamity. So part of it, in my opinion, is, I don't want to say like a cultural change, but until decision making gets out of short-term thinking, I feel like either we'll keep going in these loops until we hit a critical mass of, I don't say like a new generation of leaders, but like you had made this point earlier with messaging and different experiences in different parts of the world, and really just taking that time to like not only build coalitions, but also taking the time to understand not only what's going on like locally, statewide in your country, but also what's going on the other side of the globe. And once you realize like, hey, different countries, different standards, how can we bring everyone on a even playing field? But then the question is, will an even playing field benefit everybody only or select few? And typically commerce is in the best interest of profit and not necessarily people. So really people have to ask themselves, are you going to choose people or profits? And that's its own debate within itself.
And I'll throw this back to Nora. In your experience in your part of the world, do business leaders wait until there's an emergency or a crisis before they take to building these relationships, or are you looking for your clients to start relationships so that they exist when a crisis does come about?
Definitely create those relationships beforehand. I think it depends on the overall strategic plan of the organization. What we do is, for example, if there's a strategic plan that you have in hand, depending on what, if it's your yearly plan or 5 years, is understand who those stakeholders are, engage with them, building those relationships ahead of time, so that when a crisis do come, because crises do happen, will be on a local level, right? I'm more speaking for, I guess you could say, corporate clients. A little bit on a local level, a little bit international. You have those relationships, so you're not just call it stakeholders or decision makers. So it's really understanding the strategy of the client. If they don't have a strategy, creating the strategy for them, and then from that, doing the engagement with the key stakeholders and everything most fit for what they're trying to achieve.
And the same question for Mihail Sigler, and then we'll go back to our last panelist here.
Yes, I can relate to that well. With our clients, first of all, it's very difficult if they are too late. They have to be, when there is a crisis, usually it's very, very late in the process. So, and if you have responsible clients and responsible businessmen, they're following what's going on with the politicians, with the government, and so on. And it's very, easy then to start with the corporations. But sometimes you can see that maybe some how to say, extraordinary things from the government comes, and there are some, how to say, bad political decisions. Of course, they have to act right away, right? It means. And in such a way, of course, we also react. We see what are the consequences. But the thing is that you have to be, how to say, prepared on time. For us, we are actually, it's the same as in every attorney law case, or when you are bringing the case in front of the court. I say when you, and with us, with the lobbying, when you are bringing the case up to the politicians, we have to build the case with everything. And what we use, usually we do, how to say, all the strategic plan and communications plan, and with those plus and minuses, and how to say what our access should be, and what will be the timeline, and what will be the strategy in place. So that's it. I think it's not different than in any other country, but it's important.
And for Zeke, I would like to throw out this attitude. And you have to excuse me if I use a lot of American acronyms and idioms in this discussion, but there's an old political saying that was coined by President Truman, the buck stops here. He was the President of the United States. He had that sign on his desk. He was the head of the country, and the buck stopped with him. Is that important for business leaders, the CEOs of these companies, to understand that their position is they're leading their companies, they're the ones who are the face of the company, and that they have to take a position of leadership with regards to furthering the business that they're representing?
I mean, very good question. So the buck stops here is in fact very applicable in the case of developing countries. So for instance, you go to Africa or Nigeria or Ghana. You go to Ghana, the only person important in Ghana is the president. You go to Nigeria, he's the president, and the 36 other governors. You go to so many other African countries. So if you want to get access to mineral, say in DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, you don't have to go to any business person. You just go straight to the president and say, Mr. President, I'm interested in XYZ, and he will give you a bunch of army people to follow you to go start mining. So these are some of the challenges in developing countries. At least in America, you have businesses that introduce legislation or policy changes. In the case of Africa, in the case of Nigeria, since 1999, when they went into democratic rule, no professional group in Nigeria has succeeded in introducing a legislation for banking, for real estate, for foreign exchange, for interest rate reduction, for water supply development, because if the president doesn't like it, it's not going to work. So these are some of the challenges developing countries have. Who brings the idea for solution? Of course, when crises happen, everybody's going to rally to solve, because it's a reactionary thing. Well, what you want to do is, how do you prevent those things from happening? And so the buck stops here. Maybe that's where the African presidents got it from, this guy, because everything stops with that. In Nigeria, like I said, it's one president and 36 governors. Whatever, if the president said, I want a road to be built from here to there, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow you see tractors start bulldozing things. There are no impact studies, there are no right-of-way acquisitions, there are no something like that. But in America, somehow the people are able to do what? Resist, or at least participate. So the rest of the world doesn't work that way. Go to South American countries, go to South Asian countries, the presidents are the most powerful individual. And that's where we have the world we have today. So the professionals, if we can engage our legislative arms and begin to have these policy changes, because the African politician, again, the Nigerian politician says, you are advising me, I'm already the guy who is selling this boat. So if either you come with me or whatever you say is not going to work. And that's just the nature of the business over there. So every politician is local, you said that. But over there, they claim it and they own it. And they will tell you, until I'm out of here, that's why you have people like presidents for life. Because as long as they're still in that office, if they don't like you, nothing you say is going to work. So that's preemptive or progressive idea of, hey, let's do this legislation. I'll give you an example. When I came to America, I was fortunate to be getting into real estate. I studied it in Nigeria, came, and I went back. And I said, here are some of the things we can do about land use. Okay, in American Constitution, there's, if you're going to take people's property, that's constitutional provision. You got to pay their market value. So we can do that to give people the ownership. They look at me as like, that's an American thing. It don't work here. So oil in Nigeria, in America, oil belongs to what? If it's in your land, you have the mineral rights. But in those countries, it's a national right. So it doesn't matter, they can evacuate you, displace you, and get the mineral they want. So you go to the part of Nigeria where all this oil is being drilled, is an environmental disaster. Because again, the professionals cannot engage the political people to say, hey, this is how we do it. In 2013, I went and gave a paper on how to pay for compensation. When I finished all of that, they said, Edward, just go back to Dallas. This is not how we do things. So this is the resistance to change is also part of the challenge that leadership has not produced for a lot of developing countries. Because they don't want things to change. Because somebody, again, is benefiting from it. Most of these African countries, they say they are billionaires. When you start to describe your political figures as very rich people, your country is in trouble. When your president is a billionaire, you are in trouble. Or whatever, that is, they become a billionaire while in office. Your country is in trouble because obviously they are doing things that are not benefiting your country.
And Katerina has empowered me with special powers, so the buck stops here with me. So I'm going to give everyone on our panel about 1 minute to 2 minutes to give me one specific point that you believe is important as a business leader. And we'll start with Thaddeus. Go ahead.
in order to understand any problem, you have to understand who benefits.
Okay. Mihail Siglar, what's one thing that you would tell a business leader, something that they should possess or act, how they should act as a leader?
One of the, which we see with the more important things, the business leaders and we will say our clients as well. If you don't have a vision, that's a problem. It's very difficult to have a client or a business leader without a vision.
And Nura, in your part of the world, and we're very fortunate to have people from all over the world here so we can get a wide view, and we'll see how this changes or if they all mix. One thing you would tell one of your clients who is a business leader, this is what you must have as a leader.
I would say it's just having the understanding of having a solid strategy that's implementable in the country that you're in.
Gotcha. And what would be, coming back to you, the one thing that you would look at somebody and say, as a leader in your community, as a leader in your business sector, you must?
You know, for me, must is when I look at the factors of production is relationship, the human capital. How do you deploy it in order to get an outcome that suits you as well as the people that you are going to be doing that? So, relationship.
Gotcha. Let me just run. So vision was a big one. Understanding the issues, and have a relationship with people. Danis, what was the one that you threw out?
In order to understand any problem, understand who benefits from it.
There we go. So we can all walk out of here today and be better business leaders in our own period. And now I'd like to open it up to any questions that everybody may have. Anybody here in the room has a question, or if anybody on Zoom has a question?
I have a question. So, Mr. Opa, can you explain us in main countries of Africa, like Nigeria, Kenya, how lobbying work now? So I understand how corruption works because in Eastern Europe it's the same, unfortunately. So no, we also have practices when people who first, second people became very rich in this position. So for me it's very resonating. But still, no, for example, in Eastern Europe, professional associations work well as, lobbying tool. So association of steel production, association of energy efficiency, association of green energy, association of farmers, European Business Association, it works well. So what works well as a classical lobbying tool in Africa and maybe in several countries? What's the difference?
Well, again, I would say if you know where the president is going to be attending a wedding, or a funeral, or throwing a party for the graduation of, any of you, just be over there. And that's your lobbying. And then before you just make a donation. Let him see you visibly, because that is what counts for them. I mean, I serve on some boards and commissions in Texas. There are, a lot of us cannot ride in the same cab, because there's fear of forming a quorum. If there are 5 of us and 3 of us are attending something in my house, if a quorum is automatically formed. So there's a fear we're going to be talking about, issues that maybe come up in the board. But in Africa, it doesn't exist. So there's no formalized lobbying group or laws that say you cannot do this. You just go, or if you find an in-law or a former girlfriend, because there are a bunch of them they have, and say, hey, I want to talk to the president. I mean, you want to buy oil in Nigeria, you don't have to go to NNPC, the National Petroleum Corporation. You just find who the minister is. Okay, is the minister going to London for it? Just go over there and wait, and you get the oil. So like I said earlier, formalized economies, like the U.S., where we now have conflict of interest, disclosures, requirements, open meeting records, and stuff. Who you met and what did you talk about? It has sort of brought some sensibility, to the lobbying thing. But in those other countries, no. Do you have money to shake in front of somebody? That's your lobbying, and you get what you want.
But when Americans work in Nigeria, what tools they use?
What should they use? Is just basically, again, what is the American interest in Nigeria? The crude oil.
Raw materials.
Yeah?
No, any raw materials.
That's what I'm saying. So they don't need to do any, through any of the trade association. They find the president. Because the president approves it, he calls in the minister who is over that particular sector and said, get it done for grant. That's it. There's no, in fact, the legislature so oftentimes don't even know what is done until it's done. So there's not a chain of command in terms of processes like, okay, you want to buy the oil, submit your request, or bid on the block. Just know somebody. And that's why every Nigerian knows everybody. Because they can get you, anything you want.
But see, that's not specific to Nigeria. We have the same thing here in this country. We call it doing it the Chicago way.
But at least you're afraid that if you do it Chicago way here, they catch you, there's a trouble. But over there, yeah.
Now with Alderman prerogative, you won't.
I would like to add a little bit to that question about lobbying in Africa. So I first would love if people do not generalize Africa. It's multiple countries. Everyone moves differently. Lobbying, it's a term. I get it. There is legal laws that's being implemented and so forth in different countries. But there is cultural norms. There is certain things. There's certain principles in certain ways. Granted, yes, if you have a certain influence, certain power, certain money, you're able to push certain things if you come from a certain family. But it's not as general as all countries are the same. And also it's not as general as, hey, if you have a lot of money, you can do whatever you want to do. You go to Africa. There are certain structures in place for certain countries. I just want to highlight, for example, I guess I'm from Somalia, and I know that there's this narrative and perception that the world has of Somalia. But as someone who's actively pushing certain initiatives and certain things, and our country is being rebuilt when it comes to our systems. But for you to truly push something forward from a business standpoint, you do have to go through multiple layers. You have to get the approval of the regional state. From that, you need to get the approval from a certain ministry for them to approve whatever plan or whatever project you have going on. And then from that, you get the approval from the actual federal level. So granted, there is options of moving differently if you want. And for East Africa particularly, yes, if you come from a certain family, if you have really deep ties with the government that's in office at that time, there is more leeway, I would say. But it would be great if we lump Africa together, because every country, even within the countries, the ways that the systems are created, it's unique to the people there.
Michal, I'd like to ask you, you're dealing with in the European Union, but also in the European Union, there's the individual nations that make up the European Union. Do you have to lobby the European Union at the same time you're lobbying, let's say, the French government, or is there a pecking order? Who comes first, and how do you move down and present your clients' cases?
Thank you for a very interesting question, right? Because sometimes it really gets complicated, but that means it depends on the client and what you lobby. If you are just lobbying one of the national, let's say, the governments for your client and parliament, that's very easy. It means just one government. But the thing it is, when it comes that the legislation is needed in all among the states of the European Union. And for example, especially when you have the trial. For example, we have European Commission, we have the European Parliament and European Council, right? The Council of Ministers, and this is on EU level. So it means that European Commission, it represents the interests of the EU, whereas the European Parliament represents the interests of the people, and whereas the European Council represents the interests of the states, so the national governments per se. So, and every legislation which is dealt is actually dealt by the trial. It means it's a proposal which comes out from the European Commission, and then it's dealt within the European Parliament, and in the end it's voted in the Council. So it means that you have all the conglomerate of the interest when you are lobbying the EU, right, which will impact all the other states. And everything is there. So it means first you have the lobby European Commission and one of the, I don't know, departments in which are, there is a DG Health, you have to lobby this, the DG Health, and afterwards when it comes to the European Parliament, of course, you will then lobby, the different political groups within the Committee of Health. And it means that you have to, to access different, how to say, members, different parliamentary groups members, and usually, of course, you will see, if you see the Germany, their political group might be very big, right? Whereas maybe they will have 60 members of the parliament, whereas small Slovenia will have 7, right? And France, for example, will have, 50. So of course it counts that you go to the big ones, right? But the important thing it is who actually represents the case, or he is a rapporteur, so responsible person from the political group, and maybe the shadow rapporteur of this, let's say, directive in the parliament. And then in the end, when everything comes, right, and especially when you have to deal it with the national governments, you have to also lobby the national governments. And sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes maybe you ask the big guys, from Germany, France, and then you have Spain and all the others to lobby. But sometimes also the small states, as we are, you can also be very successful because, and Luxembourg because it's very, or Belgium because it's very easy access. So it actually really depends. And the most important thing is as well, of course you have we have the rotating presidencies, and you probably heard about it. Right? Every country is actually holding the presidency of the EU for 6 months, and actually is doing the trio. And it means trio. It means that in 1 year and a half you have the agenda. And in this agenda, it will be what those 3 countries actually will be doing. Which directives, which cases, which agendas, what is important for you at the moment, and it's a timeline, right? It's everything is set up, and of course at those times, it's some of the countries, for example, I don't know, there's Portugal, Spain, or who is holding the presidency, it becomes very important. So you have to actually fly to this state, right, and actually. To speak with the local ministers there, if you wish to actually influence the politics of the EU, of the whole of the EU. So it's a bit complicated system. When you know it in the detail, it's actually fun to do it. We love to do it. It's very difficult and challenged to understand for the clients, but there we are. There we are, the lobbyists.
You ruined my closing joke by mentioning Luxembourg. I had a whole Luxembourg thing I was going to throw out, but you mentioned that. And I'm being told that the buck no longer stops with me, and I am being told that we need to wrap it up. So I would like everybody to thank our late night guests who are on Zoom here for participating, and our panel too. So everybody, a big round of applause. Thank you for participating and your input. Very informative, and we did learn a few things that no matter where you are in the world, there are a lot of things that a common leader bears no matter where they are. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
And you moving forward to the next.
Being in politics, I hereby make this solemn vow to you, this will be wrapped up by midnight. Actually, in all seriousness, we have about half an hour because they want us out of here at 9. So I'm going to kick this off and ask our 2 panelists to do the abridged version of who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Prince, would you like to start?
I'm a gentleman.
Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Katerina Albrecht. I originally come from Ukraine, but currently I stay in the United States. And today I'm representing the global social advocacy movement, which is called Creative Society, which is right now being actively implemented in Asia, Eastern Europe, as well as the United States and 180 countries of the world. And I will share the example of how we spread the information, how we get this message to humanity, and about the role of social media in doing that, in that process. Thank you so much.
That's impressive. I should have gone first. My name is Prince. I am a Navy vet. I used to work for NATO. I do a lot of work in the realm of education, but also loneliness, which I hope I'll get to talk about a little bit right now. I am working on my doctorate at Vanderbilt University in education right now. And I am here representing myself, no other organization or political entity.
Right. Do we have any panelists who are online at the present time?
Hello everyone, my name is Dimitar Mitov. I'm Deputy Chairman of the Board of Association for Independent Judiciary, which is located in Sofia, Bulgaria. I'm attorney at law, and as I say, I'm also looking in the NGO sector, especially in the sphere of independence of Bulgarian judicial system and problems of the rule of law in Bulgaria.
Very good. Do we have sound yet? I guess not. We can't hear you.
We also have Akiko from Tokyo. She
Okay.
might be also with us.
But I don't see him on the screen.
Can you hear me now, please?
Yay!
Okay, I'll take the earpiece off. Hello, everyone. My name is Chidinma Bojako, and I head government relations and joint venture operations for an indigenous energy company in Nigeria called Hess Holdings Oil and Gas Limited, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. The official topic here is government relations leadership, and we were going to talk a little bit about Congress, but I think we ought to broaden this out just a little bit, because we have people here who are not native to the United States. So I think we'll just start, Prince, with you. Just give us a snapshot of what you would say are the most important principles of government relations leadership, meaning that which you do if you want to succeed.
Okay, I think some folks were answering that a little bit earlier too, but I think to really be successful, and this might throw some of you off, you have to be authentic. You have to have integrity, but you have to be authentic, you have to be brave, and you have to be vulnerable. A lot of folks feel like they can't trust you until you prove that you can, that they won't trust you until you've proven yourself. But if you want to be a leader, you have to be vulnerable before they'll trust you. So it's sort of like a backwards sort of way to go, if that makes sense. Maybe it didn't.
The same question to me?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I would 100% agree on what Prince said, because I think the sincerity that you have inside, this is something that you should be guided by in your life, in your relationship with people, in your work relationship, everywhere. This is something that you have to come back to every time you make any decision in your life. You have to come back to this conscience that you have. And basically, it will for sure make you successful in everything you do, because this is something that by the end of the day will give you that feeling that you've done everything possible and this was not against any belief that you have inside. So I guess this is one of the main principles that will make you successful in everything you do. Whether it's politics, whether it's, I don't know, just talking to a neighbor, or whether it's, yeah, just like I said before, anything that you do. So this sincerity, the conscious choice of yours, and, you know, just trusting yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Dimitar?
Should I go?
Yes, you could go.
Okay, for me, as a government relations practitioner in Nigeria, I would say one key success factor would be for me to be able to clearly map out my stakeholders and also have a power map such that I'm able to understand the level of influence of my stakeholders and also be able to understand their reach and how they also impact on my operations, and how, and those of them that would possibly encumber my operations, or those of them that can also even support my operations. So for me, stakeholders mapping and power mapping is very key.
Okay. You're next up.
I think that the center of the work I am speaking of as a person that is working in NGO sector, you have to clearly define your mission and your goals, because I think that if you can't, if you don't know what you want to achieve, you simply can't achieve it, because your work, your time, and even your partnerships that you have will not be will not give the maximum result.
So I have this curiosity. It's called the term government relations. And it occurs to me that's a very, very broad term. So we're just going to pipe in if you've got an answer, but would somebody tell me what that term means to them? And I'll define it. Are you trying to influence a public figure? Are you trying to get a regulation taken away or imposed by a government bureaucracy? Are you trying to influence the government by some sort of elaborate advertising? Are you trying to influence members of the legislative branch? And if so, how so? So, what's your answer to that?
So I may go first,
sure.
if you would like. I would like just to share the example of what we do throughout the Creative Society project in terms of government relations as well. What we're trying to put out to the public as well as the government is the importance of actually creating such a format of society where human life comes first. And in terms of government relations, we are trying to spread this information as much as possible, make this message reach every human being on planet Earth, and create an electoral demand so that our government representatives could actually implement it worldwide. So to actually create conditions for human life, human safety, transparency and openness of information be implemented not just on paper, but in deed, so that our society, our communities could be active participants in the governmental processes as well, so that we would not shift the responsibility, I mean just, the population of planet Earth onto one person or just a group of people who are representing us, but to work together towards achieving this goal. So government relation, in my understanding, is actually this combination of actions, mutual actions of the communities, of the society and its representative towards working on actually achieving, and not even achieving, creating this evolutionary step towards our development in general as a society of the planet Earth. So it is a combination of efforts of both parties, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to actually bring awareness to the world and to the people that we, each individual, is a society. Each individual is responsible for whatever takes place in their community, in their city, in their country, and in our world in general. So to me, this is the combination of mutual work towards achieving better results globally.
Let's turn to our two online panelists. Do either of you have an agreement with what we just heard, or would you care to embellish on what we just heard?
I think, oh, excuse me.
No, please go on. I was trying to ask if they could speak up a bit louder because I can barely hear from here, please.
Who can't you hear?
She cannot hear you because you need to speak on the microphone, because this mic for Zoom.
Oh, this is the mic for Zoom.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
sorry.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, maybe using this microphone? Yeah.
Okay, did you hear what was said for the last question and the answer?
No, I did not.
Did you hear the question?
No, I did not.
Okay, the question was, what does government relations mean to you?
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So to me, government relations refers to the strategic management of relationships and interactions between an organization and government entities, and this is usually at various levels. It could be at the local level, a national level, regional, or even at an international level. It basically encompasses the efforts to understand, influence, engage the government such that you're able to influence maybe policies, regulations, even the decision-making processes, just to advance your interest as an organization or as an industry. That's my understanding.
Okay, so is it influence in relationships to achieve a certain end, or is it maintaining a network in case you decide that you do want something to happen?
I would say it's all encompassing. You want to maintain your network, and at the same time, you also want to influence, have the possibility of influencing perhaps future policies or future processes.
Okay, can you share with us any cause that you have been involved with that is of great interest to you?
Okay, more recently in Nigeria, we have something called the Petroleum Industry Act, which was previously a bill. It was enacted in 2021, and my experience with that as a government relations professional in the energy sector was I first had to map out what possible issues at the time when the government had circulated the draft bill. So we had a public hearing where all participants had to review and possibly highlight issues they may be having with the proposed bill. What I did was I reviewed the current operations that my organization had and how that bill was going to either positively or negatively impact its operations, including the fiscal terms that were being proposed. So following the reviews we had internally, which was not limited to the government relations team, we also had our legal, our tax experts, and our financial planners review the draft proposed bill. And what we did was we had our issues logged, and we used that to influence the outcome of that bill, which later became an act.
Okay, all right, thank you. Dimitar?
In my case, our organization is working both on national and on European level. that's because of the matter that we are focusing on. As I say, our primary aim is to guarantee the independence of Bulgarian judges and prosecutors. So to achieve our goals, we have to work or collaborate with public authority. For example, in Bulgaria there is an public authority body which is named Supreme Judicial Council. That council basically elects the chief prosecutor, the heads of both Supreme Courts, the Supreme Court of Cassation and the Supreme Administrative Court in Bulgaria. So in this civil council, this is a council where various NGOs, both professional and expert NGOs like our, are working together on various, we are discussing various bills, also other matters that have connection to the topic of independence of Bulgarian magistrates and in general the judiciary in Bulgaria. So if you want to propose some reform in, for example, legislative act in Bulgaria, for example, we don't have the Lobbying Disclosure Act. Lobbying is actually unregulated in Bulgaria. So if you want to propose some act that is, if I may say, missing in some public sphere is unregulated, we have to cooperate with the public authority. Okay. Of course, we are organizing press conferences and other type of events, but the main is that you have to work with the authority.
Okay. All right. Prince, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Here's the question. What is the most complicated task you ever endeavored to accomplish, and what are some of the tools you used to get it done?
You know, every task seems complicated, but what has always helped me was sort of what Chidima mentioned earlier, is making sure that you have a network. I'll give you an example. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was leading a group of people that managed volunteers that went into the homes of a high-risk population. So I stopped it, and they said that population is still very vulnerable. So what can we do, Prince? And I said, well, you tell me. And that day, we turned it from an in-home visitor program that supported caregivers to, and we didn't know it at the time, a loneliness program. And no one was talking about loneliness at that level, except maybe the Surgeon General. But now it has been growing, and I've been having these incredible conversations with people from Ukraine, people from Kazakhstan, people from Japan, because this is an issue that has sort of flown under the radar. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up now is that it has grown in awareness because of the grassroots, because of the network of people that were actually seeing it firsthand. And then we raised it up to our government relations people. So that was really difficult because it wasn't made to happen by a president or Congress or anything like that. It was by the people, which is the way the best things work.
Okay, great. Katerina.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Very interesting question. And you know, I'll try to keep it short since we're limited in time. But what I can think of right now is actually bringing the faith back into people. So making the people believe in themselves, this is very difficult. And this is something that what we are trying to do in the Creative Society project as well throughout this, the framework of this project. Because right now, if we look at the society globally, there are a lot of inactive people who are just shifting the responsibility onto the representatives, onto the president, onto some active members of society, which are not a majority for sure. And why is that happening? Because basically the system has been designed in such a way that we are taught not to believe in ourselves, not to believe in our inner potential and the fact that we are capable of changing things. We're capable of actually bringing in the change to the world on the local level and on the global level as well. And we are capable of actually influencing the laws that are being, created. We're capable of actually having this symbiosis, working in this symbiosis with the government. So this is something that is very complicated to accomplish, but this is something that we are doing right now in the Creative Society project. And how we're doing this, we are actually right now in the first stage of implementing this project, which is informational stage, and we are talking to people. We're trying to bring awareness, first of all, that we as human beings are simply amazing. We have a tremendous potential. We have a huge knowledge base of ours as a humanity for the past thousands of years that we can use to actually gather together the best cases, the best examples in each and every country and implement them worldwide. So if talking about the tools that we use, it's of course social media, it's social networks, because internet right now, along with the technology, provides us amazing opportunity to communicate with each other. And we can see this right now, no matter what time zone, we have an opportunity to just pick up a cell phone, log into Zoom, and have an open conversation with each other, share our views, share our experience, and by this enrich each other. So we also conduct international online forums that are being interpreted into 150 languages, making this information available to people in their native language. So this is something that we are in the process of doing, but so far what I can say, let's say 3 years ago, nobody knew about the project, nobody knew about the Creative Society. But right now there are millions of people who already support the project and who already become active members of society locally, and they bring the change on the global level as well.